Good afternoon and welcome to the second meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Government Affairs for the 2023-2024 interim. Thank you to everyone joining us online here in a packed room here in Las Vegas, and I'm sure what's pretty full room in Northern Nevada. Ms. Velasquez, may you please take the roll?
Senator Daly.
Here.
Senator Flores. Senator Hansen.
Here.
Assemblyman Carter. Assemblyman De Silva. Assemblyman Koenig.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Chair Torres.
Here. Before I begin, I would like to review a couple housekeeping pieces of information. Meeting materials can be accessed on the committee's webpage located on the Nevada Legislature's website. Anyone who would like to receive electronic notification of and access to the committee's agendas, minutes, and final report can do so by signing up on the Legislature's website. When testifying in person, please turn the microphones on to speak and speak directly into the microphone. Each time you speak, we ask that you please state your name. Please turn off the microphone each time when you are done speaking. At this time, we'll go ahead and go to agenda item number 2, public comment. At this time, we'll go ahead and go to public comment. Our next agenda item is public comment. There will be a public comment period at the beginning and the end of the meeting. Each public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Staff will time each speaker during public comment to ensure everyone is given a fair opportunity to speak. In addition to testifying in person, public comment may be provided in 4 different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. To provide public comment by telephone, please call 888-475-4499. Then enter the meeting ID 832-7603-0295 and press pound when prompted for a participant ID plus pound again. At this time, is there anyone here wishing to testify in public comment here in Las Vegas? I don't believe I see anyone here in Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Carson City? I don't believe I see anyone wishing to testify in public in Carson City. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in public comment?
Thank you, Chair Torres. The public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. And we are going to go ahead and take the agenda a little bit out of order at this time because I do know that the Sheriff McMahill from Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has requested that they can go a little bit earlier in the agenda. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and begin with a presentation with agenda item number 4 from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Sheriff and team, when you're ready.
Madam Chair, Sheriff Kevin McMahill for the record, and thank you very much for indulging us and taking us a little bit out of order. I really appreciate it. I felt it was important that I had the opportunity to be here to speak directly with you all. And I'd like to just give you sort of an update of what this last year looked like for us. I took office on January 2nd, and the first 11 days that I was in office, we had 11 homicides. And quite frankly, I was wondering what in the world I had gotten myself into. We also started the year with hundreds of budgeted unfilled positions in both our patrol and dispatch centers. And then as the year progressed, as an organization, and really our entire first responder community, including the other law enforcement agencies here in Southern Nevada, dealt with a tremendous amount of challenge as we moved forward. As you well know, we had for the first time the F1 event here in Las Vegas. That had a tremendous challenge for us in the sense that there's a 3.8-mile track, multiple day closure of the Las Vegas Strip. Many folks that work up there live in the neighborhoods that we all have opportunity to serve, and a lot of challenge around that, and I'm proud to say that we pulled that off very, very quickly. That was followed closely after by 5 homeless people being shot in our community, and it was a real whodunit that we had no idea. And I'm proud to say that we have subsequently solved that case as well. And then, as you all, of course, know, your first responder community then had to respond to the shooting and the murder of 3 professors at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm again proud to say, having been there firsthand, that your first responder community all came together and just did an exceptional job. New Year's Eve, obviously, we deal with that year in and year out, with 300,000+ people show up to our community, and we pulled it off very safely again. And then, of course, as you all know, we just hosted the Super Bowl, and we're very successful in our efforts at the Super Bowl, and you can see what happens when you're challenged by what happened in Kansas City very quickly thereafter. And so I want to talk a little bit about what happened as I took office. And I asked for a 10% reduction across the board in our violent crime. There's a number of things that I stood in front of the community and you all that I wanted to accomplish as an organization. And I'm proud to say that when you look at overall violent crime, last year we went down by 9.93%. Our robbery numbers are one of the areas that we were particularly successful in. We had a reduction of 19.4%. Our aggravated assaults went down 3.6%. Our homicides reduced by 12%, and our sexual assault reduced by 19.8%. Of particular note on that violent crime piece of this with homicide, I'd like to tell you that our homicide section has successfully closed 92% of those homicides. And at Metro for the last 7 years, we've been above a 90% solve rate on our homicides, and that just doesn't happen across this country. You go to almost any other major American city, and in some of those cities, their homicide solve rates are below 30%, so real bright spot there. On the property crime side of this, we were not nearly as successful as we were on the violent crime. Overall, property crime, we went up 2.7%. However, there were some pretty significant reductions, one of which was in burglary, nearly 8% reduction, and overall larceny theft was down about 3%. Where we utterly failed, quite frankly, was in the auto theft area, where we had an increase at the end of the year of 36.5%. And that is mostly attributed, so you know, to this Hyundai Kia TikTok challenge that kids were posting on TikTok, how to very simply steal a Hyundai or Kia by popping the ignition there, putting a USB cord in it, and stealing that car. And so at one point during the year, we had up to a 90% increase in some of our area commands, and we set forth to try to do something about it. And so we did see a fairly substantial decrease from the 90%, but honestly, 36% up, just not acceptable for us as we move forward. The other thing I just mentioned to you in regards to the property crime, one of the things I put in place as your sheriff is that I started what we call a construction theft detail and a retail theft detail, and those two groups focus solely in on construction theft and retail theft. And as you know, the limit for our felony theft threshold is $1,250. That retail theft was described to me by a number of the individuals that we meet from the Organized Retail Crime Association as being as bad as California had ever thought about being. And so we decided to try to do something different about it. We put together a number of efforts where we can get comprehensive theft on, where people are stealing from a variety of different stores, getting the video, and then submitting those felony cases. And so we had a lot of success with that as well. Another area where we were not very successful was in fatal traffic accidents. Last year, we had 158 fatal traffic accidents. 774 of those, let's see where that number is. Sorry. Of our 774 of those accidents involved a pedestrian, which was down almost 5% from the year before. And of those 774 accidents involving a pedestrian, 56 of those were fatal. Just in the last 2 days, we had fatal number 28, which involved a DUI, a racing subject, and fatal number 29, which again was another pedestrian in the roadway. We have not yet seen any slowdown in our pedestrian fatalities, and that's something we're going to continue to work on. And just by way of sort of, you all obviously have your timing and your schedule set around when you're in session. But since the last time you were in session as a legislature, we've had 127 fatal traffic accidents. I'm also proud to tell you that in 2023 we had 10 officer-involved shootings, which was down from 14 in 2022. We also had want to just talk a little bit about what the year started off looking like as well, in the fact that we had over 300 vacancies in our patrol and dispatch center. And when I talk about those vacancies in the patrol and dispatch center, the first one I want to talk about to you most importantly is when I took over, our dispatch center was staffed at about 50%. We had extremely long wait times, so much so that in some cases we were exceeding 3 and 4 hours on our 311 numbers. Our 911 numbers, we were sometimes taking 8 or 9 minutes to answer a 911 call, and clearly that's not acceptable. We had taken over 2.64 million calls. 1.34 of those were 911 calls. The others were non-emergency. Average wait time was around 8 minutes, and for 911 was around 20 seconds. And the bottom line is what we did was we went in and we called all hands, really. I took every light duty officer I had, every person that had ever worked in dispatch and moved on. We looked at outsourcing a number of these things, looked at AI technology here, but the bottom line was we had to hire people. And I bifurcated the 2 job positions from everybody being a dispatcher back to the ability to have some people just be call takers and the others go for dispatch. And so in this particular case, we had 2 academy classes, one of which was 38 people and the other which was 50, the 2 largest academies that we ever have. And as we sit here today, there's currently 28 in session. And upon that graduation, we should be 100% staffed at our dispatch center. So we've had a radical turnaround in what those average wait times were, which was completely unacceptable. I do want to talk for a minute around this body-worn camera issue. And as you know, Metro had received a lot of negative publicity over the years on what it was that we were charging for our body-worn camera redaction and the opportunity to provide that to the public from a transparent perspective. Honestly, I just looked at the numbers. I had the presentation from my folks about what it costs us to do this, and the $320 was a realistic number. However, I just don't think that was realistic for people to come in and ask for the body-worn camera, and so we lowered that down to the $80 number that we're at. There's a number of things that we also decided to not charge the general public for, and that's in cases of widespread public interest, things like arrest video from the Tupac Shakur murder case, some of the UNLV shooting footage. We just provided that so that everybody had the access to it. And also, as you well know, as an organization, we put out our officer-involved shooting video 72 hours after we have it. Just by way of numbers, so you have an idea, in 2023, we received 13,687 requests for body-worn camera footage. 13% of that was from the media. Up to about 75% of that came from claims adjusters and lawyers that are looking to resolve car accidents that our officers were out investigating. Our public records unit that we stood up because of the body-worn cameras today consists of 1 sergeant, 6 officers, and a number of civilians, and it cost my organization over $2 million to staff that unit. It takes currently, right now, the turnaround time on those requests are between 2 and 5 months, depending on the complexity of the case law that was passed, I believe, last year. That also requires us to blur the officers' faces in those body-worn cameras now that we did not previously have to do. There was a question in regards to where we're going to build some future substations. You may have heard, and it's been very inaccurate, quite frankly, that we walked away from the Hollywood substation or the East substation. What happened was we were prepared to go out to bid for that substation, and we found out that the county did not actually own that land. BLM still owns that land. And so I've just been told recently by Tick Sigerbloom, the county commissioner, that BLM is very close to releasing that land to the county. We have $12.5 million set aside already in our budgetary process, and we are ready to go to bid when that land is released to the county. The other area you might have heard was we are looking at area up at Hualapai and Grand Teton. That is an area within the city to take care of some of the future growth that we have up in Sky Canyon. That was a plot of land that the city already owned, and they were willing to provide it to us as an organization. And we were looking at building that in a sort of modular, cubular opportunity rather than a stick build, because we believe that if we reduce the size of that, we could do it for about half the cost, somewhere in the tune of about $8 million. And so there's been a glitch in what happened with that area command as well. The city put that out for bid along with bidding the park that was going to go around it. And so I'm not sure exactly the status of that as of yet. We just found that out yesterday. One of the things I want to talk to you a little bit about as well is diversity and recruitment. We have right now, as we stand, we have just around 6,000 employees. 34% of those are female, 51% are white, and 24% are Hispanic, and then 9% are black, and 6% are Asian. If you look, however, deeper into those numbers, which I think is important to do, you have to look at what our sworn employees look like, the public-facing piece of what our organization is, the police and the corrections. And the numbers get worse, quite frankly. We're at almost 15% female, 51% white, 25.2% Hispanic, 9.1% black, and almost 6% Asian. So what have we done? There's a number of things that had happened over the course of my career while I was the undersheriff, and we looked at recruiting in a lot of other states. We looked at places like Chicago and Portland and California with the idea that police would come from those organizations here to Las Vegas. And I'll just be very candid with you. What usually happens is you get into a retirement system as a police officer, and no matter how miserable you are, those retirements don't transfer. So people don't very frequently leave an organization that they're already working at. And we didn't have a lot of success, candidly. And so we have really strived on what our community outreach looks like and to build pipelines into our communities here, particularly our communities of color. And I'm proud to tell you that in particular, our Hispanic recruitment has been going very well. We have a Hispanic recruitment council that goes out to not only our communities, but Broadacres. And just to give you an example, in our most recent police academy, we hired 43 individuals, 20 of whom were Hispanic. Our correction academy also started last month, and we hired 13 individuals, 7 of which were Hispanic. We also finally grew up a little bit and translated our Protect the City recruitment effort into Spanish. We continue to focus in on military folks. And what I want to tell you about your police department as well is that my CFO was recently at a major city chiefs meeting, and as people were talking about what vacancy rates look like across the country, we were only one of 3 law enforcement agencies in the entire country that had less than a 5% vacancy rate. And so we're doing well. We got a lot more work to do. We got a lot of gaps to close in there, and we'll continue to focus in on that. The other piece of my strategy here when I took over was to radically change the way it is that we think about community policing. I think what has happened in American policing, quite frankly, is that it's become a buzzword and people don't really know what it means anymore. And so I sort of set about to changing the way it is that we approach this, and started with a very simple philosophy, and that is to inject humanity into all of our interactions. And so we've done a pretty remarkable job of it, I've got to tell you. We've established a number of things in our Community Engagement Bureau, and I want to be clear about something. While we have a Community Engagement Bureau, I also have a number of area commands, and every single one of those area commands has the autonomy, ability, and authority to develop their own community policing strategies unique to the geographic area that they serve. But we also have headquarters-based strategies. And so we established the first ever Hispanic Alliance, and there's 3 officers assigned specifically to that outreach. We've recently just formed the Black Alliance, reaching out to our African American community, and the next one coming very quickly after that is the Asian Alliance. And we continue to have a number of Hispanic Citizens Academy, and we've graduated over 1,100 people since we started that. I had the opportunity to recently attend the first ever Cabalgata, which I quite frankly didn't know what that was, but it's a Mexican rodeo out at Horseman's Park. We had well over 100 horses and hundreds of people show up, and so now we're working on planning what we hope will be one of the first ever Hispanic rodeos back out there since they had been suspended a number of years ago. Youth mentorship, wellness fairs, and obviously I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to just close with the last piece of this. As you all know, later today, the Post group is voting on some legislative or implementing some things that the legislature had asked for to happen around wellness with police officers. I campaigned on wellness for police officers because what it is that my men and women see out there every single day is not normal. And it's unfortunate. We just recently lost another of our retired captains to suicide. It is a fact and a reality of the work that it is that we do. We see things and hear things and feel things and smell things that most normal people don't have to do. And so I'm trying to change culture by recognizing that it's okay to not be okay. And I have subsequently hired over 5 full-time clinicians, along with licensed clinical social workers, marriage family therapists, addiction therapists, along with a PhD to really focus in on taking care of the men and women of my organization, as well as really focused in on how to look at how do we get the entire first responder community to join forces together so we don't all have to reduplicate these things. And so we will be in compliance with what it is that the legislator asked us to do, but we're taking it much further because the men and women of law enforcement, fire services, and EMS deserve it. And so with that, I'll yield for any questions.
Thank you. Members, I'll go first to Northern Nevada. Members, any questions? And I can't see you all, so if somebody could get on the mic and just say yes or no.
Nope, no questions up here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Assemblyman MacArthur, I know you had a whole bunch of questions before this. Were they answered by the sheriff's presentation? Yes, they were. So Assemblyman MacArthur would just like to thank you personally for that. Vice Chair Flores, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize for falling a little behind in the middle of your presentation. Thank you for that, Sheriff. I first off wanted to thank you. This past session, I know we had an opportunity to work intimately with Officer Reese and Officer Hunt, and we had just a wonderful relationship. I think it was very easy to work together, and obviously there wasn't always a consistent eye-to-eye, but that politics is never like that, and I did appreciate just having a wonderful team up there, and I wanted to say thank you for sending such wonderful folk to work with. I also wanted to congratulate you. I know we did have that event with the cabalgata that you mentioned, the horseback, and just internally within small circles on the east side and north, particularly here in Las Vegas, there's just a genuine excitement. I think they've never felt that type of relationship with the community. And it's something so innocent, but I think it was very impactful. So I look forward to those events continuing. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and it doesn't directly involve just your agency, and it'll be a question probably that we'll bring up over and over with everybody else presenting. But just, we understand that we have to do a lot more investment with our youth. We know that it's a very difficult kind of conversation for you to maneuver when working with a minor, how you address them, how you approach them, how you talk to them, whose jurisdiction, where, and I know it's difficult, but I would like to know how the relationships, where do you see the relationship now with our schools? Where do you see it going? What do we need to do better? I know we had that horrific incident, and I bring it up now because Assemblyman De Silva, who's a teacher here at Rancho High School. He's actually teaching as we speak. He wasn't able to get his classes taken care of by somebody else, but I know he wanted to really have a conversation about that. I know he's been in conversation with a lot of different folk from your agency and others, but I just wanted to see if we could maybe open that conversation up and see where we stand now and what are we going to do differently.
Yeah, again, Sheriff McMahill, for the record, I completely agree with you. I believe that we have a lot of work to do in the schools. And as you well know, I'm not in charge of the Clark County School District Police Department. However, certainly when things impact us in the communities, and we all know that those kids need to have relationship. You know, we don't have things like DARE in schools anymore. We don't have a lot of the programs that we used to have, but what we have tried to fill the gap with, honestly, is a lot of after-school programs, things like our soccer clubs and our baseball teams, our PAL athletic teams where we have boxing and mentorship. And so, look, I look forward 100% to having that conversation and the involvement of my organization and making sure that we start to bridge that gap because we're leaving way too many kids behind.
And thank you, Sheriff. And I think my interest in that conversation was a lot more to do maybe with off-campus. We know a lot of these fights, unfortunately, don't happen on campus. And I say unfortunately because if they did, teachers, hall monitors, and then local CCSD police could probably respond a lot sooner. But unfortunately, these students don't fight there, right? They call each other out and they'll go to some back alley behind some apartment complex. And I was interested in maybe seeing if there's a joint effort there to try to be a little bit more coordinated, or I think every school knows where that one park is, or behind that 7-Eleven where kids just meet up and handle business whatever way they think is appropriate. But I wanted to know if there was more coordination through that lens.
My apologies. I didn't quite understand where you're going with that. So you absolutely, every single area command has relationships with the schools that are in it. We try to get our officers, and obviously it's based on how busy they are at particular times, but we'll have them go and have lunch at the school. But the other thing I want you to be clear about is we have officers that should be at those schools at the beginning of the school and when the school lets out, in partnership with the Clark County School District Police Department. We also, through our Southern Nevada Counterterrorism Center, we run in what we call the School Violence Initiative every single year. We start a week before school starts, and it's an intelligence sharing perspective, because as you rightly pointed out, usually we have something that is very simple. It might be a disrespect on a social media platform. Very frequently, it's over a girl. It might be something that was said that leads to a fight now after school out in the neighborhood. And so we share that information. Also, I forgot, I apologize, but we track every school gun, and Metro, as an agency, we go in and evaluate those children and try to find ways to have alternatives to the challenge that we have. And the numbers are actually staggering. That we actually take from the school district on the number of kids that we find with schools or with guns. And so there is a concerted effort, but I'll be the first to tell you we could be better at it.
Thank you. And, to kind of build off of that, because obviously I am an educator as well, and I do work at a school that's not in the district. And so I think there's an important part of like building relationships specifically with secondary schools, where I think you're going to see a lot more of that violence than in a primary school. I'm interested to see what actively are we doing, though, to make sure that we're monitoring those areas, because working at a school, I mean, there's local businesses that are impacted. The Starbucks that I like to frequent for my after work meetings is often closed because of violence, specifically in the shopping center, and fights that are occurring after school. As somebody who's frequenting that same location, I can tell you that there's very little, if any, police presence in the area. So I'm trying to understand, like, what is the plan, and are we putting out more officers during those hours, during those peak hours? I would say probably between 2 and 4 for school safety. And then how are we making sure that they're prevalent in those areas? I mean, I would argue, having grown up here in Vegas, where that Wendy's is, that all the kids go after school, where the Roberto's is, where that McDonald's is, the Starbucks, whatever it is that location is, where there is going to be their students are more likely to go when there's increased crime. CCSD police, I don't know that I see them working on that either. So I don't know where that coordination is and who's who's responsible for what. And, what we do see, though, is oftentimes when those fight videos get back to the schools do act, right? And the schools, there will be suspensions and RPCs and conversations with students if a video of the fight that happened in the neighborhood gets back to the school. But what are we doing to prevent those fights from even beginning?
Yeah, I mean, listen, each of the area command commanders knows those areas, and more importantly, every police officer that works in and around those schools knows those areas. Luckily for us, that also translates to one of the times where we have a crossover between the day shift going home and the swing shift coming out. And so we generally send those officers out to those locations, but candidly, they can't be there all the time. I don't have enough cops for them. That's oftentimes based upon the calls for service that are actually holding, and particularly I can let property crime calls hold, but I can't let violent crimes call that are coming in on 911. And so we also take our community-oriented policing squads, our flex teams, and we deploy them out there into all of those areas. But you are right, Assemblywoman, we won't always find a police officer at that problematic Starbucks, because if we did, we wouldn't have some of the homeless or unhoused challenges that we have in and around that Starbucks as well. So we are working on it, and we are trying to do our best with it, but I don't have the resources to cover every one of those places that we know that kids congregate.
Thank you. And then I did want to kind of switch gears and talk about a little bit of a different issue. I think there's been a lot of media attention around it recently, just the issues with the press getting information from local law enforcement agencies, including your department. And so I want to know, what does that process look like if either a member of press or a member of the public or, a law firm representing a client is requesting information? What does that process look like? And if it is denied, what a recourse does that individual have once it has been denied?
Well, for my organization, any press requests come in through my public information office. And so I guess I would need some specifics to know, what are you looking for? What's denied?
So public information, that could include FOIA requests and others.
Yeah. So some of it we just deem doesn't have a particular public interest. There's a number of things that go through our legal section as to what is provided and what is not provided, and I rely on them to give me that information.
Thank you. And so once it has been denied, then what recourse is there for that individual? Are they able to submit an appeal, or what might that process look like?
Well, in some cases, I know that there's been lawsuits filed, but I don't know that there's necessarily an appeal process for somebody who's been denied. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Vice Chair Flores?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess the only other thing is offering ourselves to be better, stronger allies in whatever way you think we need to be. I really do mean that I really appreciate it, and I hear this kind of undertone of appreciation in the community, even just with something as simple as a horse parade. But if there's anything else that you really think we could align ourselves a little bit better and work together more on, either community, and really it's because it's community policing that is kind of the starting point for these relationships. But if there's anything that you would like for us to really help us, help in any way, meaningful investment, whether it's with our time or aligning you with community leaders, whatever that may be, please reach out. We'd love to do that. Because like I said, I've been hearing from different folk that maybe never necessarily shared just this genuine interest to continue that, and realizing that, wait a minute, we can do things together. I've never realized we had to do that, particularly with the horse community. I felt like they always thought they needed to operate in secret because they don't really have a place where beautiful trails that they can navigate, but they have to take these beautiful animals out for a walk. And I think you've just really opened up the door for some amazing relationship building there. So whatever I can help with, I just wanted to put that out there, Sheriff, and the rest of your team knows that, but just wanted to make sure that you knew.
So I would also just say back to you is I'm available to you and to anyone that we can develop relationship that we don't have. As we've talked before, we may not necessarily agree on everything, but at the beginning, when you can start some kind of relationship, that leads to a lot better understanding, and we're here. And I just also like to tell you all that my team here is fantastic. They do great work. I was notified today that the director Beth Schmidt has now retired, and so I will be picking a new director to lead my team going up to Carson and the next session.
Well, happy retirement to Ms. Schmidt. I think we had a great opportunity to work with her as well. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff, and I look forward to continuing to work with some of the team members that you have here. I know Officer Reese and Officer Hunt have been phenomenal to work with, and I've actually had Officer Hunt come speak to some of my students too, which has been great. And I know officers like him and Officer Reese are out in the community doing really excellent work, and they think are the standard of what we want officers to be in our community. Unfortunately, though, I think that there has been a lot of negative press around what some officers that have done. So what are we doing within Metro to make sure that we're stopping officers that are doing things that are inappropriate, whether it be I think there's a rise of domestic violence and stalking within local law enforcement agencies, and I don't think it's unique to just Metro. I know that this is a national issue. I think you see officers that have committed severe crimes that have been in the media over the last year, including robbing casinos, and you see officer resources that are being used negatively. I mean, just on the way here, I saw a story about officer resources being used to stalk an ex-wife. So I'm just wondering, what are we doing to crack down on those issues and make sure that we continue to have officers that are meeting the high standard that I think we all expect of our officers? Yeah,
so I think the story you're referring to, we investigated that. We became aware of it, and we brought it forward and submitted it to the appropriate authorities, and that case has subsequently been charged. One of the greatest things that I've mentioned to you before is that these body-worn cameras are invaluable to us, because when a citizen makes an allegation against an officer, oftentimes, whether or not the involved officer turned their camera on or another officer has it, we have real evidence about what happened in these. But what I would highly encourage folks to do, and I'll give you an example of this. Yesterday I was reading, I know we have this issue around the food carts. I watched an interview on Channel 8 of an individual saying that his kid had been thrown to the ground by one of my officers. And it wasn't the one at the sign. I'm not aware of that case, so I asked my folks to go in and look at it. But we can't investigate something if we don't know about it. And as often, in fact, more often than not, allegations will get made, and my officers will be cleared of them. That body-worn camera has turned out to be just invaluable to us in looking at the integrity of our police officers. But I would say to you that you can make an anonymous complaint, you can make that complaint online, you can make it to Internal Affairs, you can make it to any supervisor, Madam Chair, the other piece of that really can't go unsaid is that focusing in on this wellness, because when I tell you that our officers are impacted, we have higher suicide rates, higher divorce rates, higher alcoholism rates, higher rates of everything you don't want to have. And focusing in on taking care of those that take care of us is going to pay dividends to us as we move forward in the future. And so we're really trying to figure out how to get to a place of help before we've gotten to a place of hurt and somebody's violated the law.
Thank you. I would agree, and I think that's why we've passed some of the legislative bills that we have and legislative issues that we have over the last couple of sessions. And, I think to speak to Senator Flores' point earlier, I think that there's ways for the legislature to work alongside Metro. So, if you, I guess in your perfect world, as an interim committee, we do have BDRs at the end of this interim. In your perfect world, what is something that you would like to see the state invest in to support the work that you are doing, whether it be 311 services and community policing or in mental health and wellness for officers?
Well, I think when you talk about the wellness piece of it, there's so many treatments that are available out there. Things like EMDR, which is an eye movement treatment, TMI, which is a brain magnetic reset. Things that are proven in trauma for returning war veterans that we don't have enough people trained here. In fact, most of the clinicians that I hired don't have the ability to do it. So I'm working with the private sector to raise funds to be able to train the people that are taking care of my police officers. Henderson has something, I think they call it brain spotting. Unbelievable things that are available out there, but it's got to be more than talk therapy to take care of our folks. And there's really no funding out there for that. It's also very important to mention that when we're talking about mental health, I believe at Metro we've started to turn a corner, but it's a very sensitive subject because cops think that, I come in, I admit that I have a problem with whatever it is. Maybe it's drinking, maybe it's with my wife, maybe it's with whatever. Next thing you know, you think that now you're receiving this mental health treatment, it's going to impact your future growth, your promotions, your transfers, all of those kinds of things. And so, I think there needs to be some real conversation around the fact that seeking out mental health does not impact you later on. And I don't know how you would do that necessarily legislatively, but I think that's an important piece to do that, to encourage officers to seek that help that might be available out there. The other piece to me is that, we all don't know what the other one knows about what they do when it comes to the community outreach. I hear all the time that, Sheriff, you need to do more of this and more of that. And I go to so many places that the people that are telling me you need to do more of this, I've never seen them at, and vice versa, as an example by this horse parade. And so I really think that as we could find ways, as you both have mentioned, to actually make sure that my police officers are there and supportive when you want them, because you may not always want them. I'm very cognizant of that fact. But however it is that we can support all of you in all of your efforts in the community as well, that only goes to increase our ability to make those relationships that, listen, when I talked about those reductions that we have, that didn't just come from putting handcuffs on people. That came from treating people with the dignity and respect that they deserve, injecting humanity into what it is that we do and how it is that we do it to make a significant difference.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know Assemblyman MacArthur really appreciates that too, because I had the privilege of working with him on a resolution regarding EMDR this last legislative cycle for veterans. So I know that's something that he's passionate about too. So I know that Assemblyman MacArthur and I are eager to work with you on that specific issue and finding some policy solutions. So we'll continue this dialogue this interim. Thank you. I don't believe there's any questions. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
I forgot to mention it. Sheriff, I know with the body cams, one of the questions we've had in prior sessions is how can we help by putting more of them and making them more readily available to you, because I know they're incredibly expensive. Have you seen or have we found just in the transitioning from one sheriff to the other, different vendors that maybe the technology is either more accessible, a little bit cheaper? Because I know one of the conversations we had in the past, I know the way the NRS is written now, if you're often interacting with the public, that's kind of the trigger that you have to have a body cam. But I know often there may be individuals who very seldom ever interact with the public. And then sometimes because there's a big event or there may be things like protests, et cetera, where it's kind of all hands on deck. And that's the issue where maybe not everybody has a body cam. Do you know if you've had an opportunity to speak with different vendors, figuring out if technology has gotten cheaper over the years for us to be able to make sure that we have more body cams in general?
Can you help answer that? I was going to ask if my CFO, Rich Hogan, could come up and help answer that, but I will tell you that one of the challenges that you have with it is once you've picked a vendor to go to, it's extremely expensive to try to go another direction. We have SWAT and K9 that actually have body-worn cameras that previously did not have those. But the other challenge that we also have is every time they come up with a new generation, the next latest, greatest, you have to spend money to get to that next one, right? And a very large organization like mine, it's to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars to try to outfit everybody very quickly. But as far as reduced costs other than the storage, I'll let Rich take that one.
Yeah. Thanks, Sheriff. Again, for the record, Rich Hogan, Chief Financial Officer, Las Vegas Metro Police Department. To answer your question, Assemblyman, there's really effectively two large vendors for body cameras, Motorola and Axon. And so we have some time ago made or under a contractual arrangement with Axon. The terms are really quite favorable. Quite frankly, especially considering that there's no additional charge, I should say, for storage. And we've got many terabytes of data stored there for no additional charge. So there really is effectively a lockout, if you will, from opportunities to expand beyond that. It doesn't make sense also for us to have some of our body cameras with one vendor and some of them with another vendor. It just it's difficult to manage. So as the sheriff mentioned, we have body cameras assigned to everybody that's a uniformed officer complying with the statute, a uniformed officer that interacts regularly with the public, which includes everybody in our patrol functions, SWAT, K9, community engagement, and then we've expanded that to a couple of our areas that are regularly serving search warrants. But for the most part, the investigative areas and the training areas do not have body cameras. It really becomes kind of a cost-benefit issue in the sense that those are folks that interact with the public so irregularly. Would we want to spend millions of dollars to outfit them when they very uncommonly interact with the public? So we believe we solved that problem through policy, in that when you're assigned to a special event, if you are not a body camera wearer, well, two issues. One, you can check out a body camera. I'm sorry, that's a taser, my mistake. You can check out a taser, but you're supposed to be working with someone who does have a body camera so that there's the ability to record what happens.
Understood, and I wasn't aware of that. So the new policy now is if you're somebody who maybe typically works behind a desk, there's a big event or something that just, a tragic incident, like maybe the 1 October situation where everybody's drawn to a specific location, the idea, the policy is just always at least be with one other individual who has body cam.
Well,
a body cam on them.
I'd have to say on a planned, excuse me, again for the record, Rich Hogan, for planned events, yes. I don't know that it's realistic for us in a major event to pause and make sure you're with somebody with a body camera. But for planned events, the rule is that you're working, if you don't have a body camera, you're paired up with someone who does.
Understood. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And I believe I don't see any additional questions at this time. So thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for making the time to join us today. And at this time, we are going to go ahead and recess for a quick moment. We're having some technical issues, and once those are resolved, we will reconvene. Thank you. The Assembly Committee, Interim Committee, I'm sorry, not Assembly Committee, the Interim Committee on Government Affairs will reconvene. At this time, we are going to go ahead and remain on agenda item number 4 because I do know I have a couple police chiefs that have come to visit with us and help with their presentations, and I really appreciate you making the time to come out and join us. So I would like to make sure that I get those through first. So the order right now, we'll go ahead and do North Las Vegas, and then we'll do Henderson before we have the NCSL presentation. I might make some changes to the agenda later, but for right now, we'll go ahead and begin first with the Chief of Police, Ms. Jacqueline Grava. Thank you, Chief. And I actually wanted to point out something because it is tremendous to have the first African-American woman chief for North Las Vegas join us today. And I think there was actually a pretty phenomenal story in the Las Vegas Sun about it. I probably saw it like a week ago, and then I was like, oh, she's here, and she joined us in person. So thank you so much for taking the time. And, you know, if you haven't had the opportunity to see this inspirational story, please make sure you check it out in the Las Vegas Sun. When you're ready.
Thank you so much for that, ma'am. I am extremely grateful to have this opportunity to sit here before you, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate Committee. Good afternoon. I am Jacqueline Gravatt, Chief of Police with the North Las Vegas Police Department. I'd like to say thank you for allowing our department to be a part of this joint interim standing committee on government affairs presentation. With that being said, I'll get started with the body-worn camera information. Now, we had a PowerPoint. We bring that up here. Sorry. Okay. An update on our body-worn camera policies as it relates to NRS 289-830. Our body-worn camera procedure was created in 2018 and has received a few updates since its creation. Our last update to this procedure was in 2021 when all verbiage regarding fees for the release of public records was removed. Here's the data table showing the request our department has received from August 1st of last year until January 31st. We had 70 requests for blurred BWC video with an 8 to 9 day turnaround and 31 requests for redacted BWC video with about a 31-day turnaround. Prior to October of 22, the average time it took our BWC division to complete a public media request was 16 hours. The BWC division learned that by communicating with the requester to specify what exactly was needed, they were able to reduce the amount of time it took to complete the request. Our BWC division was able to reduce the average by 6 hours. Now it takes them an average of 10 to redact these requests, which results in faster turnaround times. Along with our communication with the requester, a form was introduced in October 1, 2022 that offered a new blurred processing option to allow the requester to receive them sooner. Before I go into wellness, I think it is really important to know that we are extremely passionate about wellness, mental and behavioral health in North Las Vegas, and that was something I brought to the department before I even knew I was going to be a cop. My background is actually in mental and behavioral health with a focus on adolescents with conduct and behavior disorder, and there was some chemical dependency treatment facilities that I've worked in. Since I've been on the department, I've always been a part of the peer support program. I dedicated what I do in law enforcement pretty much due to the fact that I understand that people are in situations because of something led them to be there. And they're having a time in their life where they're not in control. Therefore, they're needing to have someone outside to come in and help them resolve whatever that issue is. Sometimes that can lead an individual to have to go to jail, but not all the time. So I really felt like I brought something to the table to look at an individual as a whole, and when they did not have to go to jail. We were able to provide resources so they can have a better outcome if they were to be presented with the same situation again. So with our department, when it comes to mental and behavioral health, our department has developed and implemented wellness programs to support our officers' emotional and mental health through peer support staff. Some of the programs our officers have access to are counseling, support groups, and stress management resources. Ongoing training and education on behavioral wellness and mental health awareness is provided to all of our officers. This training covers recognition of signs of distress, coping strategies, and access to support services. Our peer support network and peer counseling programs allow our officers to seek support and guidance from their colleagues who are trained to provide confidential emotional assistance. When we talk about an organization, we really look at who's leading an organization and what the individuals around them are like. And the stigma that's created around mental and behavioral health sometimes is not always positive. I believe that because I have a staff that are truly dedicated and believe and led by an individual who actually worked in the field, that stigma will be changed in our agency a lot sooner than some other agencies nationwide, where they don't have individuals who are open-minded, compassionate, and thinking about the overall well-being of the officers and all the employees that work within the agency. Supportive and confidential check-ins are conducted with our officers to monitor their emotional well-being and address any concerns or challenges they may have. Behavioral wellness visits, confidentiality protocols, and guidelines for addressing any identified issues have been clearly defined in our procedure. Our department prioritizes behavioral wellness and mental health awareness by encouraging open dialogue, reducing the stigma of seeking help, and promote self-care. Feedback from the officers, as well as data analysis and benchmarking against best practices in the field, allows us to regularly evaluate the effectiveness of our programming to see if there's any changes or modifications that we need to do so we can have the best outcome for our officers. This chart shows where the department stood during the fourth quarter of 2023 with the ethnicity breakdown of our commission and civilian personnel. This chart breaks down the male and female demographics for both our commission and civilian personnel. It is important to note that our department is participating in the 30 by 30 initiative, which focuses on having 30% female representation within the commission officer ranks. We have some amazing people in our department. We had 3 female supervisors that came together several years ago and wanted to form the Women of NLVPD. Since they formed the Women of NLVPD, they've hosted and had several events, including a fireside chat. They're working on doing jiu-jitsu class, and it's an environment where our women know they can be supported by other women that are going through or have the same types of challenges that they've faced. So I think, again, that goes back to us really wanting to encourage the open dialogue and provide our employees an opportunity to be in a space where they're comfortable having conversation, expressing opinion, and sharing their thoughts and their visions. And we take that to heart and we utilize that information to make decisions moving forward with our agency. This slide goes into the age ranges of our department for both the commission and the civilian personnel. The next topic to address is about recruitment. Over the last year, we've increased both our Black and Hispanic officer population percentages. Our recruiting efforts include almost 90 total events, both locally and nationwide. Over 60% of the events were held in North Las Vegas. This slide goes over the applicants through the National Testing Network. We've experienced a decrease in applicants over the years. This is not a challenge unique to our department, but to the profession as a whole. We are taking the challenge head on by focusing on colleges, military, sporting events, offering incentives, covering the cost of testing, and utilizing a marketing company for advertisement. It was really unfortunate when the recruiters were out and having conversations with individuals who were interested in law enforcement, and they did not have the resources to cover the cost of the testing. And the city of North Las Vegas, along with the police department, did not want that to be a barrier for our potential applicants. So we now offer coupons to cover the cost of the testing for applicants that have that as a barrier. The hiring process is multi-layered. This slide shows how a potential applicant that has passed the written test is no guarantee to show up for the physical fitness test. Physical fitness is an important component of this career field, and the numbers shown, not all of them passed. The number of applicants that passed the physical fitness test is represented on this slide. Again, not all applicants that pass the PT test will pass the other phases of the hiring process, therefore reducing the number further. And this is nationwide when we're talking about the hiring process for an officer. It is a written test, a physical test, there's a background check, there's a psychological eval, and a medical physical. So at any point in time, a potential viable applicant at the beginning of the process may not make it through the end. That's why when we see some of these numbers where it's like 400 applicants, of that 400, we may get 15. In the area of community policing, our department partners with schools, community centers, and other organizations to provide after-school programs that offer safe and constructive alternatives for children and teenagers. Specifically, we've partnered with schools such as Legacy High School, Simmons Elementary School, Elizondo Elementary School, and Findlay Middle School. There we provide sports, arts and crafts, academic support, and mentoring programs. The mentorship program at Legacy High School and Findlay Middle School are 12-week programs that provide guidance, support, and insight to allow students to navigate the challenges that they may be facing. Our department continues to organize events and activities that bring our officers and the community members together in a positive and formal setting. Events like National Night Out gives us the opportunity to bring our department and community together under positive circumstances. National Faith in Blue allows us to build bridges in a more inclusive communities. Our Trunk or Treat event at La Bonita provides a safe space for children. Our MLK Senior Center Thanksgiving dinner is a way for our department to connect with our seniors in the North Las Vegas community to create and foster a meaningful connection during the holiday season. The I Am Possible program at our Community Correction Center is a program aimed to make a real difference in the lives of inmates and make noticeable differences in recidivism. These are just a few of the events that we utilize to strengthen our relationship with our community. This slide shows the average response times for both 911 and 311 calls. Priority calls are in-progress calls, and for example, that's a robbery or a burglary in progress. A priority 2 calls are high call. For example, that's like a suspicious situation or a panic alarm. Priority 3 are medium calls, and that's like if you have like a hit and run with no injuries or there may be an intoxicated person. Priority 4 calls are considered low calls, and that's a vehicle burglary, there's no suspect, or an attempted stolen vehicle. To define the response times that you see in these slides, it starts with the time that dispatch actually receives the call, and it ends when the officer is actually on scene. Most importantly, our priority 1 calls have an average time of about 12 minutes from the time the call is received to the time the officer actually arrives on scene. That concludes our presentation. I'd like to thank you for having us here and then take the time to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief. At this time, members, any questions? I'll go first to Northern Nevada.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. I think we might have to nominate Senator Daly as like Northern Nevada Chair of Interim Government Affairs. He's the voice of you all up there. So thank you, Senator. Members down here in Vegas, any additional questions? Okay, Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure that, I didn't ask a question that was already asked, but I think it's a viable question. The question that I had too was, as a teacher, I was just at Rancho High School. Sorry about my tardy. Teachers being tardy, it is a thing. So my question was, what kind of a relationship do you have with our school PD, with CCSD PD, and how is that partnership working and evolving? Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking that question. The relationship that we have with Chief Black Eye is absolutely amazing. I believe that the lines of communication are always open. He reaches out to us, we do vice versa. So we're there for each other. And I can I feel comfortable saying that actually throughout the Valley, I really believe that the relationship between our law enforcement agencies over the past year have truly grown to the point where we meet quarterly to just have conversation. I would never not answer a call from another agency, but now there's more of a personal level to it where the conversations just aren't about this happened or that happened, but more really deeper diving into collaboratively what we can do together. And I can attest for, again, Chief Potts, for Chief Chadwick, for Sheriff McMahill, Chief Black Eye, a lot of additional agencies. I believe the relationship is really strong. And if any of them say anything different, let me know, and I'll make a note.
Will do, Chief. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? Vice Chair Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief, for your presentation. And first, I'll start off by just echoing some of the remarks you made. I have an opportunity every year to go to the trunk or treat with La Bonita, and you all do a phenomenal job out there. It's, there's been years where we had thousands of kids, and I know you all helped just structuring those lines so that we zigzag versus when we used to wrap around the La Bonita supermarket. Just little basic things like that the community doesn't have the knowledge that you do. When you all came in, you're like, all right, we can make this work. So I do appreciate that. And I also know that Mr. Benavides, through him, we were able to coordinate you all escorting one of our horse parades that we had. We started in North Las Vegas and then moved into multiple jurisdictions. But I appreciate that, and I'll echo the same remarks I made with our sheriff, that just that community policing and doing things like that has really I feel like the community just feels some kind of way in a positive way because of that, and I hope that we continue working together. I know over the years, I remember in 2015, the first time I ever sat in this committee, remember one of the first things, just listening to the folk that were sitting in this committee for years, much longer than I had, always talking about shifting the focus on really ensuring that law enforcement reflects the DNA of the community it represents, right? It's culturally, it's important. It's easier to understand when you hear certain sounds or songs or parties, how to address those versus if somebody is dressing a certain way, what does that mean? All those things are important, right? Community policing. And I remember one of the conversations we had back in 2015 was on hiring practices, and I know you got into all that. Just to, if you could maybe walk us through some of what you've seen. Obviously, you being in this role means a lot, and it shows that there's a pipeline there, and sometimes people don't necessarily know how to navigate from point A to point B to point C. We talk a lot about this pipeline, even with our school district, on how do you become a principal, right? Or in law enforcement, how do you become the boss? But if you could just talk a little bit about that, what you've seen and what you're hoping to maybe build on, right? Saying, here's where we started, here's how I made it here, but really here's how I want to make sure that other folk who are following these footsteps kind of have a clear guideline on how to get to where I'm at.
Thank you so much for that question. Again, Jackie Gravatt for the record. It's a really important question, and I really didn't start to think about it as a question probably until maybe about 5-6 years ago. And it was people asking me when I first got promoted to captain, like, how did that happen and what did that look like? And to me, it was me. It was what I did. You know, it was me trying my best, trying to put myself out there, trying to just move forward. But what I didn't understand and what we are spreading and sharing within our department is for our employees, all of them, to share your experiences, because you never know what you went through may help somebody else. And I didn't feel like I had major barriers or obstacles other than myself. I felt like I was my biggest obstacle. I was the barrier that was stopping me from where I could have gone. And it took people around me supporting me and encouraging me to take that step, because I had a plan. I had a plan laid out exactly where I saw my career going, and this was not in my plan. But because I had people that supported me, encouraged me, and believed in me, that this is where I am, and I'm extremely grateful and blessed. So moving forward with our department is going to really be about when we're out in the community and we're seeing our young people that have questions, being vulnerable a little bit, being vulnerable, being that humanize the badge. We're not just waking up, putting on body armor. We're humans. I'm sitting here looking at my watch because in about 10 minutes, my daughter is going to call me to let me know she's on her way home from school. I'm a mom. I have kids. I have responsibilities. And when we make ourselves vulnerable to people who are interested and want to have a career in law enforcement or just be successful in life, if we're willing to open ourselves up to having those conversations, you have no idea who you may encourage or help or give somebody some motivation. And we have teachers on our department, just putting that out there, that are police officers, that are detectives, and just sharing your experience with someone, you never know how it may help them or, have that little push for them to make a change in their career path or where they thought they should be. So again, just to go back to the question, I just really believe that we are creating an environment where there's open and honest dialogue, where our people do believe that they're being heard and the changes that we're making are for the greater good. And it's never about us. It's about doing what's best for those that are around us. And my little side note would be, to think about what's best for me would not be to be here. But I believe that the staff that we have put together, with me being a part of it, is really a move forward to what we can do for our community, not just in North Las Vegas, but throughout the Valley.
Thank you, Chief. And, you said something that really resonates with me because, it's very often and very true for women in leadership roles that they have to be asked, and we say the same thing for women running for office, right? That women are often asked first and, they'll give every reason why they might not be a qualified candidate, but they often are qualified. And so, I'm wondering from the policy lens, how do we, as a state and as a community, create policies that are going to support individuals that maybe aren't the standard applicant for a program? And I know you have some great programs that looks like paying for some of that testing so that people can apply if they maybe wouldn't otherwise have it. What else can we do as a community and as a state to support that diversity of law enforcement?
So I think that something that's so important is that we just really look at having the best candidate. And the best candidate could come in any form. And I think that having the messaging that we want the best, most qualified, most compassionate individuals to step into this particular career field is going to be step one. So it doesn't matter what you look like, where you came from, what your background is. You can do this if you want. So qualified applicants that are compassionate and dedicated and willing to put everything into it is step one. And then we make it a point when we have recruiting events that we have people that look like everyone at the events. It was brought up earlier that having someone that looks like you, so we try to diversify our recruiting efforts when it comes to the representation that we have at events. So much so that we do have 2 full-time recruiters. We also have a list of, I believe it's like 15 reserve recruiters. So depending on where you're going, what event you're at, we want to make sure that we truly do represent that demographic, that population. When we have military events, we have officers that are prior military. When we have college events, we have officers that have graduated from UNLV, because there they find a connection, and the connections may be different at every event. So we do look at that. It's very strategic when we're looking at who we're having going where, because you never know who you may reach.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Members, any additional questions? Go ahead, Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I had a bit of a more pointed question there, Chief. When it comes to recruitment, my question is also with how we are creating the PD of the future, the North Las Vegas Police Department of the next 10, 15 years. And so, I mean, I know there's been significant concerns, law enforcement, the military, many other public service sort of entities, when it comes to bringing folks into the career field. And my question is, when you look at these numbers, I mean, you had 1,100 almost in pre-pandemic applicants, and now we're averaging about 400. That's a significant decline in the amount of even folks who are putting a piece of paper in, applying in the first place. So what do you think is causing that? Is there a cultural shift? I mean, there's been talks of this great resignation. There's been talks of like people rethinking what work means, what an actual career or a profession means. Is that also something that's affecting law enforcement? Are you seeing that particularly in the North Las Vegas Police Department?
Jackie Gravatt for the record. That's a great question. And I think it kind of goes back to what Sheriff McMahill said, talking about how DARE really it's no longer exists in schools. When I look at what the future of our department looks like, right, I'm not looking at what it's going to look like in 5 years. I'm looking at the future, the 10-year mark, 15-year mark, exactly what you're talking about. And so when we talk about wanting to have this robust law enforcement force that's out there willing and wanting, it starts with us, with our kids in elementary school, being in the schools during reading week, participating in arts and crafts, because I look at elementary school like a seed. Those children are a seed that we've planted. But we have to continue to water it. We have to continue those relationships with these children, with law enforcement professionals, where their interactions are positive and they want to be police officers for Halloween and they can see themselves as police officers. So we're not going to necessarily change our people that are of current age to be law enforcement, depending on what their relationship with the career field has been. But when we start with our younger children and we planted the seed, we have to continue to water it. So what we're doing with our agency is, Assistant Chief Harris and I, when we were appointed about a year and a half ago, we had some in-depth discussions about where we really saw the department going and how we were going to get there. And we both almost simultaneously had said it was about building a relationship with the community, including those children, and then developing our employees. So much so we have mandatory leadership training. It has to come from both ends. Our people have to be confident in what they're doing, and then our community has to trust us, and we have to invest in them by being present. So planting the seed with our young people and continuing to water it so they grow and they flourish, because once we step back, they're not going to grow. The whole message would be lost. We don't want all of our interactions with our young people, with our community to be negative. We want them to have the positive interactions where they know we believe in them, we support them, we're human, humanize this badge, and we definitely come to some similarities.
Thank you. It's interesting you say that because a lot of that is very similar to, both of us. Our trade as educators, and, we talk a lot about how you have to have more positive interactions with a student than you do negative interactions, and what that does to build relationships. And so it's great to see how local law enforcement is able to use a similar pedagogy in practice in order to really improve our communities. And I want to ask you, and, I guess this is a good notice for all the other chiefs and law enforcement agencies that are going to be presenting today. I want to ask you the same question that I asked the sheriff from Metro, and that's, if you were to see anything, what could we as a state legislature do to support work that you're doing in the community? What changes would be meaningful to support the work that North Las Vegas Police Department is doing?
Thank you for that question, ma'am. Again, Jackie Gravatt for the record. I think that when it comes to our sessions and our legislature, just having the conversations with the agencies, making sure that the representation from the law enforcement is there and present during the process. When it comes to community, we want to be there. We want to be there to support them and to protect them. But a part of that is with the decisions that are made during session and what some of the laws look like, and are they truly in the best interest of what we do as law enforcement. I believe that sometimes the conversations need a little bit of a deeper dive and then have some subject matter experts there to provide some insight that may be the catalyst for making a decision or not making the decision. We love to be present. We love being present. We love expressing and sharing our thoughts, especially when it comes to the community. I believe that our relationship that we currently have with the legislature is really strong. I do feel the support. I hear it from my city. And as long as we continue to foster those relationships and being open and honest and candid when you have to, putting your beliefs and be able to present facts when it comes to community engagement, when it comes to community policing, when it comes to making decisions about laws that are going to be affecting our citizens.
Thank you. And to be more clear, is there any specific policy that you would like to see your initiative? And that could include funding. It doesn't mean we're going to get it done. I can't promise that here today. But is there something that you would like to see an investment on or change in?
Thank you. Again, Jackie Gravatt for the record. Specifically, if I were to have to go into specifics, I'd really have to, really deeper dive into it so it can be an open and honest answer and not just an off the cuff. And I think that would be fair, but I am extremely grateful and appreciative for the relationship that we do have with you.
Thank you, and I look forward to continuing this conversation to hear more about what you would like to see changed, and we'll continue that conversation throughout this interim. So thank you so much. I don't see any other question, members. Is there anything else? No, Assemblyman MacArthur? He's good this time, so it looks like we're good. Thank you so much, Chief, and thank you for joining us. Thank you. And our next presentation, we're going to keep Washoe County on their toes. No, we'll just go ahead. Washoe County, I know that you had asked whether or not you'd be able to join us. And yes, don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you, Washoe Police Department. So we will have you go following the chief's presentation here with Henderson. So at this time, we'll continue on with agenda item number 4 and with the Chief of Police, Chief Holly Chadwick from Henderson.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Torres and members of the committee. I'm Holly Chadwick. I am the Chief of Police for the Henderson Police Department, and I'm here today to present general updates on our department. First, we'd like to talk about, as you know, Henderson is the second largest city in the state of Nevada. Our population as of January 2023 was 336,534. That covers 118 square miles. Our current staffing for our professional civilian staff, we have 201 positions approved, we have 187 filled, and we have 14 vacancies that we are currently filling. For corrections, we have 104 approved, we have 92 filled, and we currently have 12 vacancies. I'm happy to report the next academy will graduate 3 corrections officers, and we have 9 coming into the new academy. For law enforcement, we have 464 positions approved, we have 387 filled, and we do have 77 vacant. Those are mainly for the new area command that we are going to plan on filling this year as the development grows. As you know, Inspirada is only halfway developed, so we're slowly, gradually pushing into that area command with our staffing. And we currently have 12 graduating next month from our academy and 25 scheduled to go in our new academy on March 11th. Our officer-citizen ratio right now is 1.15, which is filled. Our goal is 1.38, which is approved. As you know, we are recognized as one of the safest cities to live in, and our community surveys continue to rank community safety as one of the top issues for our residents, and it remains one of our highest strategic priorities. Our city council and city leadership have invested significantly to maintain strong fire and police departments by dedicating over almost 60% of our operating budget to community safety. Our residents report more than 90% satisfaction with police services, as well as the competence of our officers and feeling safe in their neighborhoods and from violent crime. We are nationally accredited through CALEA, which is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. We are also implementing a Rehiring Our Heroes program as a force multiplier for the next 2 years to help supplement some staffing while we build up our force. Last year, we completed construction on our new police station, which will also serve for our state-of-the-art communications center and a training facility that also houses our own police academy. Our new dispatch center will increase the number of dispatch consoles. It will have a separate dispatch training area, and it will allow for a dedicated fire dispatcher. This spring, we will also finish construction and move into our new forensic laboratory and evidence vault. This will provide additional space and increase our operational capabilities. Our Henderson's Crime Lab is one of the only 3 accredited public-funded forensic laboratories in Nevada, and the only lab, is one of 3 accredited public-funded forensic laboratories in Nevada, and the only lab in the state that provides footwear and tire track examination. There are only 65 certified examiners in the world that do this who are trained, and we are fortunate to have 2 of them working in our lab. We also have the only certified 10-print examiner in the state of Nevada. As far as school initiatives, we are very focused on our schools and getting in there with our youth. We have our DREAM program that we do. We have our Every 15 Minutes program. We have our PAL gym services. And because our charter schools aren't covered by Clark County School District, we do provide extra enforcement there and do our best to get into those schools whenever those principals call us. As far as community relation interactions, we have a robust unit, and also our entire department works towards any community relation activities we can do. Some of those throughout the year that we participate in is our National Night Out, our Coffee with Cops, our Citizens Academies. We do open houses at each area command. We do Shop with a Cop. We do our Thanksgiving meals, Halloween safety, Vegas Pride Parade, and various diverse recruitment events throughout the year to engage with our community members. We also have a very good Explorer program, and as of July, we are hoping to have a new cadet program approved through our department so that we continue to capture 16 to 21-year-olds that want to be police officers and help build them up so they can prepare for the academy. One important note I would like to cover with the committee with regards to how we hold our officers accountable. On May 1st, I was named the police chief. At that time, I discovered there were multiple internal affairs investigations that had not been completed. Many of these were spanning over a year. I took immediate action to ensure these cases were appropriately reinstituted into the structured disciplinary process per policy and the involved officers' collective bargaining agreements. During this process, I identified discrepancies that deviated from best practices and significant concerns affecting fair and impartial internal affairs investigations. I worked diligently with my command staff to update our policies to reflect best practices to ensure accountability and consistency. Since enacting these changes, we have shown this corrected process ensures fairness, accuracy, and impartiality in our discipline process. Our communications center, we currently have 1 administrator, 2 managers, 42 dispatchers, 6 of which are floor supervisors. Overall, in 2023, we received over $300,000 calls for service last year. Each year, we are noticing a gradual increase in 10,000 calls for service. One of the most important things I'd like to focus on is our 911 answer times. We currently answer in 18.5 seconds from the time the call is initiated to the time you get a live operator. That is not enough for us. Our goal is 15 seconds, which we do have an average time of 79.36% to answer in 15 seconds or less. That is a goal that is set by the benchmark cities for 90% or more, and we continue to strive to reach that goal. We are currently upgrading our phone lines from E911 to the next gen 911, and we prioritize approximately 8 hours a month of additional training for our communication staff. For our crime and response, in the year 2023, we had 3 officer-involved shootings. In the year 2022, we had 4. We have noticed a 5.2% increase in person crimes from 2022 to 2023. This is unfortunately consistent with national and local trends. We have also noted a 14% increase in property crimes from 2022 to 2023. The main driver of this, unfortunately, was the stolen vehicles that were part of that TikTok challenge. If you remove those stolen vehicles as a main driver, our increase in property crimes dropped down to 5.77%. We would like to note that our burglaries are down 10.6%. Our robberies are down 14.53%. Our ag assaults are down 6%. Unfortunately, in the year 2023, we did have 12 homicides. The trend that we have noted in those is the majority of them are domestic related, and that is something we are focusing on to try to curb that issue. Out of those, all are solved but 1. As we move on to traffic safety, this is something that we are very concerned about. Last year I had 11 fatalities. This year I already have 8. We are noticing a terrible trend in the valley of driving patterns and fatalities. We are taking proactive measures to increase enforcement initiatives, also partnering throughout the state with joining forces with other task force. And as we notice certain weekends that may have a high volume of traffic due to special events, we are increasing our enforcement efforts out there to try to be present and mitigate these driving patterns. We also consistently push out public service announcements and social media posts to encourage people to slow down and be respectful of each other on the roadways. Unfortunately, again, we are noting an increase in traffic that we really want to focus on because we don't ever want to lose a life. With regards to our recruitment efforts, we have very diverse recruitment efforts where we attend job fairs, colleges, and festivals, not just locally, but throughout the country. We also are partnering with the IACP for the 30 by 30 initiative. It is important to us that we continue to hire diverse and qualified applicants for our department. We are also currently going through a website redesign so we can have a website solely focused on the recruitment efforts for the City of Henderson and our Henderson Police Department. Right now, our sworn demographics are we have 87% male and 13% female on our sworn side. We have 37% male and 76% percentage for our professional staff. So we have much higher females on our professional side. And that's something we need to focus on. This job can be very difficult for women, and there's just different ways we need to recruit and focus on those attentions to increase our diversity. Our recruiting efforts also show an increase in testing numbers with our American Indian, Asian, Black, and Pacific Islanders, and we currently have over 30% of our department who come from diverse ethnicities. With regards to our media relations and public information requests, our PIO office has 1 sergeant and 2 officers who handle all video redactions, media requests from reports and policies, audio requests, and photo redactions. In January 2024, we added 1 part-time law enforcement support specialist who focuses on police report redactions, but also assists with PIOs with the audio, video, and photo redactions. In addition to these tasks, the PIO unit manages our media relations and interview requests, crafts and distributes press releases, oversees activity across all social media platforms, and is available 24/7 by phone on a rotational basis. Our office receives, on average, 10 to 20 FOIA requests each week. From 2020 to 2023, there has been an approximate 96% surge in body cam requests alone. The HPD PIO unit not only fills FOIA requests for all media, but extends its service to any citizen requesting it. It is important to note the redaction process for a 10-minute video can vary and take between 20 to 30 minutes or up to several hours, which is contingent upon factors such as the number of officers featured, the reflections in the videos, and the level of movement captured. We also have to be cognizant with the audio and make sure that we listen carefully to ensure that there is no dissemination of any restricted information so that we protect the privacy rights of people. We value transparency with our community to include public records requests. There are substantial costs to these requests to include software, training, and additional personnel. These costs divert important funds from our primary mission, which is to ensure the safety of the community. We have noted where some members of our community try to monopolize the process as a fishing expedition, which further exacerbates the cost and timeliness of these requests. Our department currently has a backlog of 10 months to fulfill timeliness of these requests, and it continues to grow at an untenable rate. The Henderson Police Department values its positive relationship with the news media. We strive for transparent communication, and we attempt to accommodate any in-person interviews that are asked for. Sometimes we are unable to comment due to pending litigation, arbitrations, or scheduling conflicts. We would like to just make it known there is a small portion of the media that wants to sensationalize stories for their own purposes while omitting factual information. I want this committee to know I have high standards for our department and the members, and I will always hold each member of this department accountable, both professional and sworn, in addition to myself. But I also believe that we have to provide fair and thorough investigative processes that uphold the officer's rights per NRS 289. Our community deserves transparency and to know we are holding our department members to high standards. Anything reported to the contrary is misleading and biased. Our Henderson Detention Center. In the spring of 2023, the City of Henderson proactively commissioned an outside consultation for our Henderson Detention Center to identify needed improvements for our facility. We have added 5 new positions over the last 6 months to include a senior cook, a senior detention center technician, a central control room operator, a training sergeant, and a part-time supply and equipment technician. We have proactively added temporary overtime positions to avoid burnout, increase morale, and assist with organizational operations. We have a new on-site training facility to reduce overtime for in-service post-required training, which helps reduce burnout and increase morale. We have also currently installed 85 food flaps in 2 pods, which allows for safer restricted housing, safer contact during meals, medical assessments, psych evaluations, and it will decrease airborne pathogen exposure. We have proactively instituted a plan to provide body-worn cameras to all our officers. We currently have 96 body-worn cameras in the jail, and this was paid for through a one-time state grant. We have created a separate body-worn policy written specifically for corrections officers, and all our corrections officers were trained and the cameras were implemented in December of 2023. We are the first detention center in the state to implement a body-worn camera policy and one of the few in the country. Our current facility has undergone a Millennium Camera project where we have added an additional 250 cameras to our facility. This helps us replace all these cameras from the old analog camera system to high resolution digital cameras. This also allows us the ability to connect the City Emergency Operations Center on a live feed, and this project was covered by a federal grant. We recently renewed our NAF Care contract for inmate care. Part of the renewal of this contract was we added an additional nurse. We created a swing shift position to cover high activity areas, and we have increased our psych and mental health evaluation hours. All inmates and detainees are also encouraged to submit grievances if they have complaints, and those are responded to and answered within 72 hours. We've also worked with the city attorney to reduce the time in the facility waiting for a psych bed for our misdemeanor diversion program. Each case is reviewed by the city attorney, and if an inmate's case needs to be evaluated sooner, a correction supervisor will call the city attorney directly to expedite those. We've also purchased a body scanner, which reduces the entrance of contraband into the facility to minimize drug dependence, drug overdoses, and the introduction of weapons. We are also developing a program with the Department of Welfare and Social Services for individuals who need housing resources, substance use problem care, medical insurance, mental health, and unhoused services for our post-care after leaving the Henderson Detention Center. This program will put us in compliance with AB 189, AB 156, and Assembly Bill 121. Our Henderson Animal Control and Care Center, currently last year we serviced over 4,900 animals in the city of Henderson. We responded to over 14,000 calls for service in the field. We handled 295 animal bites and took 856 reports. We are proud to say we were able to adopt 2,972 animals last year. 778 animals were reclaimed by their owners, and 249 animals were transferred to rescue groups. Our veterinary staff performed 2,565 in-house surgeries to ensure every animal is healthy and ready for adoption. These surgeries include more than 1,698 spay and neuters, 510 dental cleanings and extractions, and 448 additional surgeries for laceration repairs, eye surgeries, tumor removals, and more. More than half of the animals admitted into the animal shelter received medical care or surgery. In the year 2023, we were able to add 6 new positions, 2 new full-time animal control officers, an additional full-time veterinarian, an additional veterinarian technician, and 2 full-time kennel attendants. The City of Henderson has proactively commissioned a third-party consultation, Citygate Associates, to conduct an operational analysis of animal care and control. This entailed a staffing analysis, facilities analysis, financial overview, and best practices of the division. The final report should be completed in the next few weeks. We've also asked for a puppy store moratorium to be worked on and update through our HMC. Our shelter improvements in 2023 included upgraded turf in our exercise yards, commercial washer and dryer installation. Our adoption courtyard had multiple improvements to include shade structure for the visiting area, turfing the area, planting new trees, extending the concrete sidewalk, and installing a ground drainage system. We have also upgraded our misting system in the dog kennels. We also have the fortune of partnering every month with adoption events with members of the local community and also our Golden Knights and Silver Knights. We also have a robust volunteer program where we have over 90 active volunteers who come in and help us with the animal shelter, and they have logged 10,000 hours of service in 2023. Regarding our health and wellness and reference NRS 289.510, the City of Henderson has partnered with a third-party contract clinician to perform mental health and wellness check-in visits conducted off-site. The goal of these is to provide confidentiality during these wellness checks. These checks are designated for 30 minutes with the option to go a longer time frame if necessary to reduce stigma, allow for individual opportunity to discuss his or her concerns regarding mental health issues, and increase access and awareness to appropriate mental health care. Most importantly, we want to improve the overall well-being of our peace officers. The City of Henderson will be starting these wellness visits in the next 30 days. Our Wellness Center also has experienced police and fire peer support coordinators, a peer support team, and employs 2 clinicians. It is important to note that during any critical incident, our officers do know that if they need to ask for help or ask for time off, we will provide those resources for them, and we always have a peer support person go out to those scenes to assist them. Our Wellness Center also provides mental health therapy services to department members and their families. We are fortunate to have 2 facility dogs, Jinx and Brooklyn, and a volunteer-certified therapy dog, Molly. The Wellness Center provides suicide alertness training to over 96% of the police department last year. We also provide mental health, suicide alertness, and critical incident training throughout the years, multiple times throughout the year. We are also fortunate and grateful for the City of Henderson's concerted efforts to focus on the mental and physical well-being of our sworn and our professional staff members. In closing, I would like to thank the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Government Affairs for inviting me to speak to you today on behalf of the City of Henderson and the Henderson Police Department. It is an honor and a privilege to serve our community, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this time, I will go ahead and open it up for questions, first with Northern Nevada.
There are no questions up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Northern Chair. At this time, I'll go down to Southern Nevada. Members, are there any additional questions here in Las Vegas? Looks like they're trying to be polite and figure out who goes first. Go ahead, Assemblyman De Silva.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief, for your excellent presentation. Again, my district is really north and east Las Vegas. Don't have any sort of overlap in Henderson, but I did have some questions that were sent to me from a few folks who live in Henderson. One happens to be about the whole transparency issue. I know transparency has been something that's been in the news of late. There's been several issues and even articles talking about the lack of transparency that many Henderson residents are complaining about the HPD. So my question is, what's going on in regards to that issue? I even there was even a quote in the Review Journal from a former deputy chief of the Los Angeles Police Department said that there's an entrenched culture of corruption. So I was giving you this opportunity to address those issues and to to have a viewpoint from your angle. Chief, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Again, Holly Chadwick for the record. Unfortunately, the incidents that people are reading about right now occurred 2 to 3 years ago. And so my job since I got in place was in May 1st was to address all these issues and start moving us on a path forward. That was part of the reason why I changed our internal affairs procedures, because they were not being done correctly. We are being transparent. However, what's being reported is not being transparent. One thing I will address without getting to the intricacies of that case, because I do need you to know that case is scheduled to go before an arbitrator. And so I've been very cautious to not put this out too much in the media, because people do have rights and they have to be handled through a certain case in the court of law. But just so you understand, this case, or this specific incident that's been talked about lately, occurred in April of 2021. Those officers were placed on leave in December of 2021. In December of 2022, it was my understanding that some discipline had been recommended. However, from December 2022 to May 1st, when I got in place, nothing had been done to formalize that, and these officers were still on paid administrative leave. That almost puts them at 1.5 years being paid to be off work. That is unacceptable, and again, something I had to correct. There is never a time where an internal affairs case should take that long. It should really only take a few months to identify the issues, investigate them appropriately, and then present them to the reviewing authority to be decided on. So to answer those questions, I absolutely want transparency, but I also have to balance the rights of not only our community, but those officers involved in these incidents. And just so you know, when I came in place at May 1st, there were a lot of those cases that had not been resolved in internal affairs, which I had to then actively review and make decisions based upon what was placed in front of me. I can tell you from May 1st till now, our process has been re-streamlined to be done correctly, and it's something the officers wanted to. They understand we hold them to a high standard, and the expectation to wear this badge is that you better have a high level of code of conduct. And if you stray from that, there is a process in place to address those issues. They wanted to know that too, and that's why they were involved in making sure this policy was strengthened, so that they know they will be held accountable, but it'll be done fairly and based upon the facts presented to us from a correct investigation.
Just a quick follow-up, Chair. Thank you, Chief, for that commentary. So I have a quick follow-up. So when it comes to the IA division itself and the transition from the prior chief to yours, are there any specific kind of reforms that you've made policy-wise with the division that can streamline these sort of processes and make the department more transparent to the public? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. Again, Holly Chadwick for the record. We did change the entire policy to make sure it is very clear on the officers' rights and how they would be adhered to, but also it's very clear on the policy and what happens when you do get served through IA and how the investigation will go, and then where it goes from there for reviewing authority, and then your rights through your collective bargaining with pre-disciplinary hearings and grievance procedures, and then, yes, through to arbitration. So everything is very clear and streamlined, but it also adheres to their collective bargaining agreements. It adheres to the NRS and their police officer rights, but it also adheres to our strict standards of code of conduct and what is and isn't acceptable, and what we will investigate to ensure that none of that behavior occurs in our department.
Thank you. And, I don't think I have to quote news stories to you, because I'm sure that you've seen like all of the press that's coming out regarding just recent issues. And it seems like, in multiple instances, discipline was reduced by yourself and maybe your office, your team. So what was recommended was actually reduced. And so I don't know that is consistent, and I don't know that that's really helping create the culture of a police department that we want here in Nevada. So my question next would be like, what oversight exists to create the culture within Henderson Police Department?
Thank you for the question. Yes, to answer that, there were changes in the disciplinary recommendations on those cases without getting into the specifics, because again, there's a lot of litigation and arbitrations going on. But I can tell you those investigations were not adhering to best practices or following the law or the internal affairs procedures. And so therefore, when I reviewed them, I had to just read them for face value and read what were the facts of the case and make those decisions through there. I can't speak to people before me who did or didn't make certain recommendations. I can tell you moving forward from May 1st, since I've taken over, everybody is very clear on the type of disciplinary decisions we will make. Unfortunately, I can tell you that I have already had to recommend termination of 3 officers since I've taken over, and a demotion of an officer. I don't take that lightly, but I can tell you when I'm presented a thorough and unbiased investigation, then I follow the discipline matrix accordingly. But that's the problem from the past, without getting too far in the specifics, that these cases were not done following the officer's rights or best practices. I don't want that moving forward, because again, it's a failure on us as an agency to not properly investigate and then, yes, hold officers accountable for their actions once it's proven through an unbiased investigation through internal affairs. And I apologize, I think you had a second part to your question. I may not have answered it.
Yes. Is there any citizens advisory board that is overseeing some of these decisions?
That's a great question, and that is something we are currently establishing. For many years, we did have that advisory committee, and then unfortunately over the last few chiefs that were prior to me, they got rid of that or removed that from part of our protocol. That is something that we absolutely want back in place, and it's something that we've been working on. But again, in order to put that together, I have to be very cognizant of putting together the right committee of diverse candidates within our city of Henderson, so that I do have diverse mindsets coming in. I don't want it all to just be like-minded, like police. That's not fair. I need other people to come in from the city and the community to sit on these panels and help us address any issues. We've also revamped, which goes into that question, we've also revamped our it used to be called our Critical Incident Review Unit. We had to revamp that because of some issues, and now it's called our Training and Analysis Unit. We've gotten the policy up in place for that too. So there's a lot of things from the past year that we are having to reconfigure and redo so that it's done properly. We've updated all our policies. We're putting together a plan in place both internally and then externally to make sure we have the proper oversight with everything we're doing. And I openly welcome that. I want that for our department and for our city and for our community.
Thank you. And would that advisory board fulfill the role then of like oversight and that oversight review board through the city? And then would because I believe Metro has one, and I don't know that Henderson has one. And then what is the timeline? If you are currently in the process of implementing that, what is the timeline and when will that be implemented?
Yes, our goal is to have that implemented within the next 6 months. It's one of our top priorities. Unfortunately, over the past year, there's just been a lot of things that I've had to correct, and it's definitely a priority to us, but we had to get in our internal processes corrected first before we then pulled the community in to help us. And they will have oversight, and they will be part of the process. I can't put them as part of the process of internal affairs because that's a collective bargaining, but I can make sure that any questions or concerns, we are transparent and answer those, and we will make them part of the understanding of why we make decisions and how we're moving forward.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. Maybe I'll finish with the community questions, and I'll start off maybe with some questions from the legal community. I know the Henderson Detention Center has a contract with Securus. I think that's the system that they utilize so that either family or attorneys can contact individuals that are being housed at your detention center. And I know there had been concerns raised, particularly with the folk that I had opportunity to speak with, just the legal community in general, that the system was a little bit unreliable at times, difficult to navigate. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to directly work with the vendor and see if they've been able to address some of those glitches, some of those concerns. Obviously, not having for family not having access to someone in a detention center is devastating. But then it raises a whole legal question whether or not counsel was able to get their full 20 minutes or 40 minutes. I think they have a two-tier structure. I think they're a 20-minute and then a 40-minute structure that you have there. And I know just the concern was just out of the 20 minutes I was supposed to get, I got 10. Or out of the 40 I was supposed to get, I got 7. You know, so I don't know if you had those issues elevated to your level, because obviously you're kind of seeing everything up here, and you're not in the everyday IT questions, right? But I just wanted to know if those concerns have been raised to your level, and if there's been conversations with the vendor.
Yes, and it's twofold. Unfortunately, the facility is a lot of concrete, and so it makes it difficult with connections. So we have been working hand in hand with not only that company, but with our internal IT department to help facilitate what is the connection issues and how can we have a better rate of making sure these calls don't drop. We also, as you know, we do the in-person visits, but we also make sure that they get the virtual visits now too. And I believe I was told up to 7.5 hours per week if we can accommodate based upon what's going on. But again, if the system doesn't work, then that doesn't work. So we are actively working on that with the company, but also with our facility, because again, sometimes it's hard to get the technology to work properly when you have concrete all around you. But it's something we are actively working on because, again, anybody in our detention center is still a human being, and we value them as human beings, and we want to make sure they have the opportunity to talk to their loved ones, their legal counsel, or anyone else they need to communicate with.
Thank you. And I know the legal community will be excited to know that it's being looked at, and that I think ultimately that's what people want. The other question that was raised to me was, I believe you have a green card system when it comes to car accidents. I think you just exchange it's like a small green card that you just exchange with information. The only question that was raised to me was, and I don't know if it's called the green card program, by the way. You may just call it the card program. I don't know. But I know that one of the concerns that was raised is that the information was just exchanged, but there was no formal traffic accident report or deeper information taken in. And I just wanted to maybe get better insight as to if you've heard of that complaint from the legal community or not, and if there was any changes in the horizon to that particular approach.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's called a driver exchange card, and basically those were instituted many years ago to try to help with staffing issues. So sometimes when you have a vehicle accident, let's say in a parking lot, and it's just damage on damage, so there's no injury to a person or anything else, they do have that opportunity to just exchange information so that we don't pull an officer out there and do a report. Having said that, if somebody from our community wants us to respond to something and take a report, we don't say no. We respond to everything. In addition to that, anytime we have an accident that causes injury, we take reports on those. So again, reports will be taken. It's not that we don't. This was just one of those initiatives to maybe help us keep officers on the street. If it was a simple accident with just property damage on property damage, and people were okay with exchanging that information. But however, there are some times where people don't want to exchange that information, and that's okay. We will come out to the scene, and if they want a report, we'll take it, or we will help facilitate the information exchange if that's what they want.
And thank you for that. And I think that's maybe involves more with folk just educating the community, because I know one of the issues that they've had is where you exchange information, driver A and driver B, and maybe driver A doesn't provide correct information, and then there's no police report that's done on site. Then when it comes to trying to get that information from the DMV, because no police report was done on site, they don't release information either. So then it just becomes this whole trying to figure out who's that, and I think that's where the legal community was coming from. But I think taking it back, the ask could just be in educating folks, stay on site. If you're not sure if that's a real driver's license or a real insurance card or whatever, or they're refusing to give that, make sure law enforcement shows up and you stay there. And I mean, ultimately, that's really the way that you address that. But I appreciate that. Thank you. Switching over to the community kind of lens, which is really what I appreciate having the conversation with you all about. And I don't have an opportunity, just because of the nature of where my district is, I'm northeast as well. I don't have an opportunity to do a lot of work in Henderson, but I try to get out there every time I can for either, you have wonderful events there all the time for family and all that, so I appreciate it. I saw that you had one listed on one of your slides, and I may have missed what it was. I think it was called the Dream. And I was just curious to ask more about that. What is that program? Who are you interacting with? And then just in general, how much are we interacting with the youth, schools? And I've had an opportunity at many occasions to invite folk from different agencies to our schools, and they're always very responsive. But I'm always curious to know just what's happening, stuff that we don't see and we don't even know is happening. I think it's always good education for us.
Thank you. Again, Holly Chadwick for the record. Our Dreams program, so as you know, many years ago we had a DARE program, and then that seemed to be phased out really kind of across the country. So what we have now is called a DREAM program, which stands for Decisions, Responsibilities, Education, Achievement, Motivation, and Self-Esteem. This focuses on fifth graders, and we get into as many schools as we can to do this program. One of those things, though, of course, this costs time and staffing, and so we would love to be able to go into every school. We just don't get to do that every year, and so we kind of have to rotate those around. But that is a big engagement for us because, again, I think we all know the younger we start being part of these youth and their lives, the better impact we can have as they grow up in our community. In addition to that, we do the Every 15 Minutes program. That's in the high schools, and that rotates every other year. We have 5 high schools in Henderson, so one year we do 3, the next year we do 2, and then we continue to rotate each year. We are very fortunate to have that practically fully funded by donations and sponsorships through the city of Henderson and the community of Henderson. So we are grateful for that. And then our PAL Gym, and of course, any other engagement we can do, we're always doing it. We are always in the schools for the school reading. We are asked to go to the schools all the time for different public events or events they're doing in their school for the youth. We take our canines with us if they want, our SWAT unit, because they love to look at all the equipment. And again, it's humanizing the badge. And also now that we have Jinx as part of our department, who is our new service dog, she will be attending those events too, and she is specifically trained to engage with all community members, and she does great with kids. So we are always in the schools, but I can tell you one of the biggest things we need is we are not able to touch our charter schools as much as we want. They are not part of the school district as far as school police and other things. It's very important to us that we don't lose the members of the charter schools too. Now, we are actively engaged with them. The principals call if there's any issues, if they need us for anything. We are always going through and checking on these schools. But for us, I would love to see at some point in time for us to develop a school resource officer that can focus also on our charter schools so that they get the attention they need also to feel like they're part of the community and we're engaging with those youth.
And this is anecdotally, and I may be wrong, but can you correct me on the conversations around body cams? Do you also have dash cams on all your vehicles?
Yes, we do. And we have forward facing, and then we also have rear facing, where when we put somebody in custody in the middle seat, that's constantly recording.
And the only reason I ask, I was curious to know who your vendor is. Obviously, you're a smaller jurisdiction, so it's harder for the larger jurisdictions to maybe be able to jump in on that, just because the cost is not there. But what is the vendor that the city, Henderson is with?
We are with Utility Body Camera. I don't know who owns them, so I can't say if that's a sister unit of Motorola. I'm not sure on that, but I do know we use Utility. And we do have body cameras not only for our patrol officers who are out in the field, but anytime an officer from a specialized unit goes on any type of contracted overtime assignments or any type of engagement out in the community, they are all required to wear body cameras.
And I know that's obviously promotes transparency, safety in both directions, right? If somebody's making a false claim that an officer did something, it protects them. Or vice versa, if something did happen, we can access it. So I think everybody on this committee really appreciates that. And I think we've had conversations where we looked at Henderson and tried to ask that we maybe replicate some of that in other agencies. So I do want to say thank you for that, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, and thank you. And just to follow up on that, we are grateful that we have body cameras for our department and for this community. It not only does transparency through the community and does help with this complaints that we get, but also it does hold our officers accountable. They understand that your actions will be reviewed if you stray from what you're supposed to do with our code of conduct. So we love having body cameras for a variety of reasons. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to continue on the conversation of transparency. And we've talked a lot about transparency now in terms of like body cams, and we talked about transparency in terms of like internal affairs. But, I remember there was a story from this summer that, talked about like Henderson Police Department saying, we're not going to invite media that don't shed us in a good light. I don't think that's the role of local governments. I think transparency in government means that, we have information accessible at all times, regardless of whether or not that's positive, because I think sometimes highlighting the things that we need to work on is how we improve as a government system. I also think that is like that is the role of media in our society, and I think that's a constitutional right that is protected in this country, and that's one of the things that makes this country so great. So can you talk about your relationship with media, and then what we're doing to kind of overcome, I think, some of the issues that are very clear, because the media is very happy to share all of the different issues, and I think that's a positive that they're saying that there is an issue with getting access to public information. So how are we making that accessible, and how are we making sure that media is a partner in the work that we're doing in Henderson?
Thank you for that question. I'm aware that email, unfortunately, was taken out of context. To explain what that email was trying to say is a lot of times police officers shy away from media attention because for a variety of reasons they get nervous about safety or security for their family or for their faces being seen out there, or people just get nervous talking in front of the cameras. So what that message in that email was trying to send without it sounding correctly was encouraging our officers to say, hey, we would love for you to participate more in media events where you can talk to the community and talk to the media about certain events you're doing, and we will make sure that we're there to make sure you're comfortable with any questions they're asking. Because again, not every officer is trained on how to talk to people in the media, and they get nervous, and they also get concerned if their faces are out there sometimes. So it's just, again, educating our department on it's okay to talk to people. The media is our friend. They are our ally. They do help message things out for us consistently that we need as far as traffic safety and DUI. Everything they do is a partnership with us, so we value that. And to move forward on that transparency, I mean, we rarely, if ever, deny FOIA requests. The problem with our department is there is such a backlog. So I know there becomes a frustration sometimes, if you're waiting 10 months for something. And so we are working on that, but unfortunately, I only have so much staffing, and I still have to make sure my staffing spread out for my community safety first, and then make sure I have stuff in place for redactions and proper dissemination of these videos. But I can tell you, we value our media everybody is part of this valley. I grew up here, so I know this valley, and I still see some media members that I know from when I was a kid watching them on the news. So it's very familiar to me. I love it. I want to be a part of it. We are very proactive in inviting the media in. We just did a retail theft blitz with our investigation services division, and we actually had a member of the media riding with us. So we are fully transparent with everything. It's just sometimes we just ask that the media be transparent also. Some of the things you're reading are being taken out of context or being given a skewed narrative. And again, we don't want to argue with the media. We want to be a partnership. And I tell you this much, if we're not doing something right, the expectation is we are held to task, and I will stand in front of my media counterparts and answer questions they have within the components of what I can answer. Because again, some of these things do go to legal arbitrations and depositions and other things. So I also have to be cognizant of what I do or don't say, so I can value that process and not skew it in any way.
Thank you, and thank you for that response. And I want to ask you the same question that I've asked every chief and the sheriff as well. And that's, if you were to see the legislature, how can the legislature be a partner with Henderson Police Department? Like, if you were to ask the legislature to do anything, what would you like to see the legislature do?
Again, we love to be part of the process, but really, I think I've touched on it. It's really important to us that we can get in our schools and that we can help develop these programs, not just with this Clark County School District schools, but also our charter schools. I just feel like we're missing something there with those youth, and we want to be able to capture them. And part of that takes resources, takes additional funding for these programs, such as Dreams and Every 15 Minutes, all the different things we want to do to impact our community and be a partnership with them.
That's interesting, because I don't think you're the first person that said that today. So it looks like that might be something potentially that this committee works on then as a BDR, is what we can do so that we can support kids. And, honestly, you probably had the committee with like the most teachers and kids of teachers, because I know Assemblyman MacArthur here is the son of a principal at a school, well, way back when, not anymore. And so I know that's something that we would be eager to do and eager to work on with you. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and thank you for making the time to join us here. And thank you, Ms. O'Rourke, for joining her as emotional support. At this time, we are going to go ahead and continue with this agenda item. So I'll invite Washoe County Police Department to go ahead and come up in Carson City. Don't worry, we didn't forget about you. I know there were concerns. Whenever you're ready, feel free to begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Torres, members of the committee. I am Jason Walker, a lieutenant currently assigned to patrol representing the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. We are very pleased to be here to provide an update from the last time we spoke, had meetings at the 82nd Legislature. In walking in the building today, it seems like we had just left and happened to walk in with a face that I remember from, it just seemed like yesterday, and here we are again. So that 82nd Legislature was my first. I'm glad that that's over, and I'm happy to be here to provide additional insight on the things that we do. I have a short PowerPoint with some successes that we've had for the year. I've taken several notes, so hopefully I didn't miss out on any of the questions that I'm expecting to come after my presentation, but off with the presentation. Again, I work for the Washoe County Sheriff's Office, and we provide law enforcement services for the unincorporated area of Washoe County. We are also responsible for operating the only adult detention facility for pretrial detainees and sentenced misdemeanors within Washoe County. The agency has an authorized strength of 494 commissioned, 331 civilian, and 55 intermittent hourly employees. 61% of our commissioned staff is male, 39% female. 78% white, 12% Hispanic, 4% Asian, 2% Black, 1% American Indian, 1% Pacific Islander. That nearly reflects the statistical diversity of our community. I'm very happy to say that. I just recently promoted. I was the backgrounds sergeant. I feel that I am the largest cheerleader for our agency, and I think that, and it was in conversations with Chief Gravatt, Sheriff McMahill, is that when you look like your community, it just makes it easier to police the community. I'm very proud that our diversity is also reflected in the commission staff. The Sheriff's Office has an annual operating budget of $137 million. That's 2023 number. We also have over $5 million in restricted funding, such as grants and donations. We have 3 bureaus. They're the Administrative Bureau, the Operations Bureau, and the Detention Bureau. One highlight, or a couple of highlights of our Administrative Bureau is our backgrounds division. For last year, 87 total new hires. A majority of that was commission staff that went into our academy. Currently in our police academy, we have, I believe the number's down to 25. We went in with 27 to start. Oftentimes, for varied reasons, it's about a 10% failure rate. So when we went in with 27, we're still sticking at 25, hopefully to have all of them finish the academy so they can move on in their careers. In the administrative bureau is also our community engagement communications. A lot of the questions came out with where we are in the community, what's the media relation, what's this, what's that. We have a very robust community engagement and communications division. We have a full-time, we call them ComRel, Community Relations Director. We have a PIO sergeant that's in there, and we currently finished, just recently finished interviews for an additional PIO. I feel, as well as Sheriff Balaam feels, that if we aren't communicating with our media, we're missing the boat. We spend a lot of time getting posts out. It's the year 2024. Everything is the computer that you have in your hand. Somebody's stuck in traffic, they go to social media, they want to find out why. Oftentimes we have a post that's out there that says avoid this area, or another law enforcement agency has something that's out there. So we highly believe that that is the right way to go. With our community engagement office, we believe that making a difference in the Washington County community starts with the community. Washington County Sheriff's Office focuses on a collaborative, community-oriented approach to building strong partnerships and promoting public safety and trust. Through the Community Engagement Office, the Washington County Sheriff's Office maintains a constant presence within the community, both virtually and in person, in addition to the office's law enforcement function. Our ComRel office completed 345 appearances and 140 hosted engagement events just last year. I'm sure with where we're going with resources, hopefully they come available, and persons that want to contribute to those, these numbers would be even higher for next year. Moving on to our detention bureau. One thing that we touched bases on last year in the 82nd session is our detention services unit. One of the things that we really want to put out there is resources available to prevent recidivism. Oftentimes we run into the same inmate over and over and over again, and I believe that we can all agree if you continue to do the same thing over and over, that's truly the definition of insanity. So what we try and do is find the core root problem. What can we do to get them the resources that would help them to move on and become successful at whatever they become successful at? So highlighting the detention services unit, 2,636 inmates served, including applications for programs and services within and outside Washoe County. That represents an increase of 341%. 429 inmates were transported to alternative programs and incarceration by the Inmate Assistance Program. That represents an increase of 55%. 528 were approved for SNAP funds. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. 549 were approved for Medicare. 557 had auxiliary assignments. And what the auxiliary assignments are, it's one thing to be in the jail and you have to just do your time sitting in your housing unit. We also have in-house work program positions. That auxiliary assignment might be somebody that's assigned to laundry, for example. Somebody that's assigned to cleaning the front lobby, for example. So we are proud to say that although there are inmates that are in there doing time, the detention services unit really focuses on what else can we do to make this a wraparound to prevent the recidivism. Another thing that we have is our programs division. A large percentage of our inmates are participating in substance use, domestic violence, and parenting programs while they're incarcerated. Our Operations Bureau, which is all of those that are listed there, Civil Investigations Patrol, there's our Major Accident Investigation Team, Marine 9, Motors, Raven, Search and Rescue, SWAT. I just wanted to touch on patrol, and just in the 12 months of last year, we wrote 4,240 cases, and out of those, arrests were 2,040. That's about 40 arrests a week. And just like the other chiefs and the sheriffs that spoke before me, it's busy all over. Just because Washoe County, is the area that it is, we're busy all the time. I don't want to say staffing, but oftentimes we're a little shorthanded, and that's for various reasons. People get sick, people go on light duty, vacations happen. but we try to get out there as much as we can. Going back to our, I don't think I touched on Detention Bureau yet. As far as our fiscal year 22-23, our average daily population in the jail, 1,247 inmates. Of those, 210 are female, 1,037 are male. Our average length of stay is 17 days. Total for that fiscal year, just shy of 15,000 bookings. Mental health resources in the Detention Bureau also falls under the Detention Services Unit. On average, 58% of our inmate population are prescribed mental health medications. We have video core connections. We have iPads now available for use within the housing units. They're able to access their email. They're able to access their mail. We are very proud to have those out there. Another highlight of our operations bureau is just our total calls for service that include calls being answered from dispatch. Total calls for the service, just over 79,000. Dispatch calls, just a little over 17,000. Police initiated, just shy of 34,000. Unspecified calls for service, just shy of 28,000. Our search and rescue resources went out 83 responses. Raven, which is our regional helicopter program, 44 responses. Out of that, 136 responses involved the incident management team. That's where we bring out a trailer. We have video, other teams that go out mainly for search and rescue operations. Very proud to have those resources available to us and in the community. We also have our Forensic Science Division. Forensic Science Division serves 70 local, state, federal, tribal agencies, 13 of the 17 counties in northern and central Nevada, and 1 county in California. Scopes of the services include breath alcohol calibration, controlled substances, crime scenes, firearms, biology, DNA, latent print processing, latent print comparison, and toxicology. And you can see some of the highlights there. For example, the breath alcohol calibration, 140 calibrations performed in 2023, and we go all over the state to ensure that the testing capabilities are out there up to the standards. Our crime scene response, 169 assignments in 2023, firearms, 841, latent print processing comparison, just a little over 120, toxicology, which is alcohol and drugs, 4,604 assignments in 2023. Just like the other divisions that talked before me, it's busy all over. Touching on body-worn cameras and an update for body cam, I reached out to our subject matter experts that are record supervisors and asked them how many requests that we've gotten. I don't know the specific date range on this. I'm assuming that it's within the last 12 months. Our requests were 133. Currently, we do not charge a fee. Turnaround time varies depending on what it is and how much footage there is, or if they're looking for something specific. Time frames can be delayed. Currently, we're working on requests that were received months ago. The current redaction program that we have is better than the one that we were using before. The manufacturer of our body cam is Axon, one of the largest ones. We have a very robust program with them, but their redaction software, we ended up going with a different type of redaction software. As you can see right here, it takes approximately an hour to redact 10 minutes of footage. Oftentimes that, Records determines if the request can be completed and the level of redaction based on who is requesting and if they're a party to the case. I believe it was the Henderson chief that had talked about if there's reflections, if there's other persons that are there. So the amount of redaction, oftentimes, it's definitely reflective of when we can release that body cam footage. And again, I don't want to say that staffing is an issue, but we currently have a case manager and we have several people working on redactions. We are getting them done as fast as we can. Somebody can request a body cam online or in person. They're processed the same as any public record request that we get. We have policies in place which are directly in line with NRS 239. Touching on behavioral health wellness, for our commission and civilian staff, that is definitely a priority for the sheriff and the executive team. Sheriff McMahill touched on it earlier today in his presentation that Post is having a hearing today that requires the annual visit. However, Post gives direction on that. We will definitely go in tune with them. We currently have a mental health counselor on staff that's available to all employees. I added in a PowerPoint slide, 289-510, which was touched on by one of the chiefs earlier. Again, it says standards for the annual behavior wellness visit for peace officers to aid in preserving the emotional and mental health of the peace officer and assessing conditions that may affect the performance of duties by the peace officer. I just wanted to highlight that. That ends my presentation, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Lieutenant. At this time, I'll go ahead and open it for questions in Northern Nevada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one easy question. On the forensic part of it, I know you guys handle the DNA testing in the criminal database and all that stuff. Is that in the forensic department, and do you cover the same number of counties and agencies for that testing as well?
Jason Walker, yes, sir, we do.
Okay. I just didn't see the DNA part in the presentation was all. That was it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And it doesn't appear there's any additional questions in Northern Nevada. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and go here to Southern Nevada. Vice Chair Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Last session, I had a bill where I was working with OHVs, off-highway vehicles, and I wanted to get your perspective. One of the issues that was raised, and it's my understanding, other than Clark County, pretty much every other county is very friendly to off-road vehicles, but it's also, I get it, population, it's just a different landscape. But what I wanted to ask is one of the things that was raised by some members of law enforcement is that in Northern Nevada, one of the things that they see and that is frustrating law enforcement, that is, they'll take somebody's driver's license away. And because it's a smaller jurisdiction, very often interact with them often, they're very well aware of who that individual is, whether it was a DUI related or something else, but they don't have a driver's license. That sometimes they'll see that they jump on an off-highway vehicle, like a side-by-side Can-Am or Razor, if we speak of a brand, and then they'll drive that, and there's nothing law enforcement can do. Is that something you've heard of and or seen?
Jason Walker, for the record, thank you for the question, Vice Chair. I believe that OHVs are titled large all-terrain vehicles, and those persons that do drive them have to have driver's licenses. There's several prongs to that question there. What I can tell you with the current law is that those persons driving those OHVs need to be licensed if they're on the roadway. In answering your question, I personally haven't run into that, where somebody gets their license taken away, they can't drive a car, but they can drive an OHV. They are titled large all-terrain vehicles, and there's laws specific that say if they're on the roadway, they have to have licensure as well as insurance. I'm not positive if that answers your question.
No, thank you for that. It does. And it might just be a particular unique situation that happened in an isolated incident that was brought to our attention. And I've always moved in the direction of trying to be more friendly and trying to allow for folks to operate all-terrain vehicles. We see other states who do it. And so I'm very much in support of that. But that was just one little concern that was raised, and I said I wasn't aware of that. And I just had an opportunity because of your presentation that I could ask somebody who's every day kind of in the weeds of it all. The only other thing that I'll ask, and I reached out to some of the folk that I know from the legal community up north, and they really did they were very responsive in a very positive way, that they've very easy to work with you and your office and all the folk there. They're very happy to work with you, and they believe that there's transparency when they requested it. So I wanted to put that on the record, just from the attorneys that I reached out to in the last couple of days. But one of the things that they raised that's not related to your office, but it was to a neighboring jurisdiction, the concerns with the body cams being turned off while officers were engaging in conversation. It kept recording, but that they kept turning off body cam audio. And I think they had like a colloquial reference to it going red or blue. And then I think some of it caught some media attention. I just wanted to maybe ask your perspective if that's something you've heard about or you've interacted with, and if you had any feedback as to any of that.
Jason Walker for the record. Thank you for that question, Vice Chair. I believe that it's best to leave your body cam on because then it raises the questions like you just brought up. That's my stance on that.
Fair enough. And who's your vendor for your body cams? And that's my last question, promise.
Jason Walker, Axon.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Lieutenant Walker, I know you were taking notes during all the hearings so that you could be prepared for the range of questions that we had. And, I'm happy that we were able to surprise you. And so far, I don't think any of the questions that you have, maybe one question that you've received has been asked before, but that's probably all. I do want to kind of ask on some similar topics that I had discussed with some other law enforcement agencies. And I wanted specifically to understand, the role, working with public information, what the processing time looks like for FOIAs and requests for information, what the relationship is in Washoe County with the media, and what could be strengthened, what services or what resources maybe are lacking to fulfill those requests in a timely manner. Thank you.
Jason Walker for the record. I hate to say that staffing is an issue, but staffing is an issue, particularly for public record requests. Body cam also is a problem. Currently we have, like I stated earlier, we have one case manager and we have one person that focuses their efforts on redaction. If there's any persons that are on light duty and we can use them in that capacity to ensure that that person isn't waiting too long to get their records request fulfilled, it's one of those things that we prefer to get them done as soon as we can. We do know what the law states as far as NRS 239 and all this and that. I'm not saying that we don't get too many, but based off the infrastructure that we have to complete them, I would say that we do. If I could triple our staff to get those public record requests out as well as the redaction, I'd love to figure out the funding source for that. That way we don't have such a backlog.
And, a clarification too, and, I'm not too familiar with that process, but as far as staffing for the redactions, does that have to be an officer, or is there other staff that are not police officers that can fulfill those requests?
Jason Walker, I apologize if I misspoke. We have a professional staff person that works on redaction. We utilize the additional resources of a commissioned person that is on light duty because they're available and we see the need to put that person in to fill those requests in a timely manner.
Thank you. And then another question kind of on the same topic, and I don't think you misspoke. I just want to make sure that I understand the issue because I think this is a conversation everybody is saying kind of the same thing, which is we need more staff if we want to expedite the responses to these requests, right? So I think everybody's kind of on the same board. Every department is saying the same thing. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the process correctly. And so then how, are you at capacity right now, or is there an issue with getting more staff to fulfill this job, or is the most that's in the budget right now is for that one staff member?
we're squeezing our budget for that staff member. We are looking forward. I do know that our 2024 budget is a little bit larger than our 2023, and I'm hopeful that we can put some funds aside to increase that staff. I don't want to say that we are at capacity, but we are months behind on filling those requests.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? And then, Lieutenant, the same question that I kind of asked every agency, which is, in partnership with the state legislature, what would you like to see kind of come out of a legislative session, or what policy would you like to see, or changes would you like to see?
Jason Walker, for the record. I like to mirror those chiefs and the sheriff that spoke before me. I believe it was Chief Grovat that says having those open, honest conversations with the legislative group. Those are definitely appreciated. Also feeling supported with what was the right thing to do for the great people of the state. If I could put, and I know your question was if I could put anything specific onto what we could get, if there's additional treatments or funding avenues for increases in mental healthiness, or to increase our peer resource groups. I believe, and it's been touched on in everybody's presentation, that mental health awareness is huge. Oftentimes, and again, out of all the titles that I've had in my career, the title that I'm most proud of is dad and husband. I just happen to be a lieutenant working for the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. We are all human. We all do have great days. We have bad days and we have good days. I think that there was a stigma on mental unhealthiness. That pendulum is now swinging back to include discussing it right now with the legislature, discussing it with the 3 previous presentations. If there is additional treatments that we can use that'll help us to have great days every time, I think that's the best thing. But I do look forward to having those open, honest conversations for the remainder of interim and then on to the 83rd session. I think that when we continue to do those, and not all the conversations are friendly, but they're not unfriendly. And I think that we can all agree that saying no sometimes is the right thing to do. We are all here in the bipartisan effort to make the right decision, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing those conversations.
Thank you, Lieutenant, and I appreciate that, and I look forward to continuing these conversations during the interim as well. Like when I had just stepped out, I ran into the chief from Henderson, and we had a couple of conversations about what can we do so we can work together for mental health, and I think investment is one side of it, and so I look forward to continuing that conversation, and I believe that's something that this interim committee would likely be interested in working for, although I can't speak for the entirety of the committee. I think that, I've heard similar comments from my colleagues, and I'm sure those in Northern Nevada, although I haven't had the opportunity to see you face-to-face during this interim, I'm sure that you all would agree it's something that we can work on. So I look forward to working with you and partnering with you on that issue. Thank you for presenting today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we can go ahead and close on agenda item number 4, and we can go ahead and open up agenda item number 3, which is an overview of public records law. Today, we do have 2 separate presentations, and I do want to thank Dr. Conrad in Northern Nevada. I apologize. I know you have been sitting there for quite a while, so I really appreciate your patience so that we can hear from you, as well as Mr. Clark, from principal with the National Conference of State Legislatures. So we'll go ahead and begin with Mr. Clark, the program principal for NCSL, to give an overview of public record laws. And when you are ready, please begin.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Will Clark, Program Principal with the Center for Legislative Strengthening at NCSL. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a general overview of state public records laws across states. I'm going to be covering a wide range of topics, going over some of the general components, talking about some practices. So I'm happy to focus on some of those after the hearing. If you all have questions or want me to do some more extensive research, happy to do that for you. This topic falls within my portfolio because I focus on legislative IT and legislative oversight issues. So this is kind of a neat kind of fit for those issue areas. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the entities that are covered by public records laws, the applicability to local governments and government in general, the types of records that are covered, who can make requests and the fees that can be charged, the types of exceptions that exist, penalties for noncompliance, timelines for responding to requests, and then a couple examples of state body cam requirements in other states. And just as a quick disclosure, I'm not an attorney, and so the information I provide today shouldn't be considered legal advice. So at a high level, every single state has a public records law. Without exception, most of them are based off of the federal Freedom of Information Act, and they have a lot of similar components. They're generally applicable across state and local governments, including all three branches of government typically, and then they follow down into local governments either explicitly or implicitly, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. There are a lot of similarities between all of the different state laws. A lot of the kind of clear distinctions that you'll see between state laws are the structure of statutes. So as you know, Nevada has a clear structure for its statutes, and all the other states do as well. Some of them have similarities, but a lot of times you'll see the structure of the information will be kind of the major distinction, but there are a lot of similar components. The other thing, too, that sets states apart is there are various exemptions. And so the exceptions to public records laws, I think, are really what create some of those distinctions between the different states. And then just at a high level, too, as you all may know, specifically with public bodies to officers in terms of applicability. So for example, with the state legislature, there might be different requirements and rules for a legislator versus a department within a legislature. And so that can sometimes trickle through to other branches of government as well. In terms of local government applicability in general, the state laws do apply to local governments. In general, it's, again, you're looking at exceptions to the law, not to which local governments are covered. So, and states cover this area in different ways. So you can see with Arizona and Nebraska, very clear, explicit call-outs to local governments being that the state records law applies to them. So any county, city, town, school district, political subdivision, for example, in Arizona. And but there are other states that have different methods of the applicability for local governments. So for example, in Minnesota, they say that all government data is covered by the law. And then they go into what a government entity is that is covered, which includes political subdivisions. And then it defines political subdivisions, which then gets down to that county, that statutory home rule charter city. So just in general, across states, there is that local government applicability. And sometimes there'll be specific provisions that call out, say, for example, a committee of a school board will be covered. And so they'll explicitly say that. And sometimes that's determined in case law when it's not explicit in state statute. And across states, there are many practices. So again, this is where I started to get into the different provisions and statutes that I'm happy to go back after the hearing and talk about, the number of states that fit these different bullet points. But I would say the majority of states typically do not have requirements of citizenship for who may request records. So a lot of state records laws will say that any, quote unquote, any person is allowed to request records. And there are many states that have no distinction as to who may request, which then implies that anyone can request records. However, there are some states that require a requester to be a U.S. citizen or to be a citizen of that state. Wide variation in fees, especially now that we're reaching into the digital age. So previously, fees typically were set by the number of pages that would be included in a request. So But that was, back when all records were either paper or microfilm, and so maybe it'd be 5 cents per page. Some of those fees are still set, but now a lot of records laws are moving towards understanding that the fees that can be charged should reflect the amount of time that goes into fulfilling the requests. So I'd say that in general, most states do require fees or allow agencies to charge fees for records requests. And those can vary by the type of record. For example, a motor vehicle accident report might have a different fee than a registry for a deed. And some states have very clear fee schedules, while other states have fees that are kind of scattered throughout their statute. So a particular document might have a very specific fee attached to it. And then there are exceptions also, and some flexibility granted in a lot of laws. So some states specifically state that additional costs can apply if there are extraordinary expenditures of time that are required. And then a lot of times when those provisions are in statute, there's also another provision that says the entity is responsible for providing a summary or an explanation of why there's going to be that extra fee. And just like every state has a public records law, every public records law has exemptions. So while the philosophy of public information and government being public is more dominant across states, there clearly are necessary reasons for exemptions. So the most common reflect protection of personal information. So you can think about HIPAA, various federal requirements, and then you can get into various provisions for respecting individual privacy and individual information, so social security numbers, potentially other identifiers of individuals, some of the most common provisions for exemptions. And then exemptions in state laws can either be very general or very specific, depending on the state and the type of exemption. And another thing to think about with other states' laws, and it seems like this is also applicable here in Nevada, is that they're really living, breathing, ever-changing types of laws. And so these are often impacted by court decisions of someone, if a requester or another individual on behalf of a requester brings that to the state Supreme Court, that can change the implementation or the interpretation of public records laws. And of course, statutes and constitutions also change over time. And so as we see, these laws do change across states. And so this is just an ever-changing environment that reflects the will of lawmakers and the interpretation of the courts. There are a particularly wide range of penalties for noncompliance. This is an area where I think there's a lot more diversity across the states. So some states allow only for injunctive relief in courts. So if an individual requester is unhappy with the response they get from an entity, oftentimes their only recourse will be to take that instance to court, where the entity might have a civil penalty, and then if the court rules in favor of the requester, along with reasonable attorney fees. That's fairly common. Some states on one side of the spectrum don't mention any penalties for noncompliance, while on the other, there are some explicit criminal and civil enforcement provisions that can apply. Oftentimes, the language says willful in terms of not complying with the requests. And then some states have penalties related to specific types of records. And one example is in Colorado, and that's with their criminal records, specifically with their criminal records law. And then some states have an open records ombudsman to assist with disputes. I believe about a quarter to a fifth of all states have an ombudsman. And so that individual or that office can then help if there's a dispute between a requester and an entity and hopefully mediate that. And if the requester is unhappy with the response, or if the entity itself disagrees with the necessity of complying with the request. Again, variation in timelines. Some states don't specify a timeline for responding to requests. Some states require requests to be addressed in a quote-unquote timely manner. Some states define what a timely manner is. Some states don't. Some states have specific timelines that can vary based on the type of the request. And this can be for the acknowledgement of the request, and it can also be for complying with the request. So some states, for example, have a requirement that an entity must acknowledge a request within 10 days versus returning that request within 25 days, and that varies quite a bit across states as well. And then, like with the fees, some states do have exemptions for difficult or time-consuming requests. And like with the fees, there'll be provisions where an entity, if they do take that route, will have to provide some sort of explanation, some sort of estimate of why that's going to take excessive time. And then just rounding up my presentation, just wanted to provide some examples of state body cam requirements. Because the funding for body cam systems across states is still a relatively new phenomenon with federal funding in the last 5 years, different states prioritizing this. We do have a list of states that currently require body cam systems for law enforcement agencies, but I just wanted to provide these 3 examples. Generally, states that have body cam requirements, they typically do consider them public records, and so then there are exemptions for release of those records, but there are some states that lean more towards them not being records, and so the exemptions are for when those can be disclosed. California and Florida are both consider them open records. With California, a law enforcement agency can delay release of the records during an investigation. So that caveat of when there's an investigation going on, that's a fairly common characteristic of public records laws with body cams. And then also in California, an agency may blur or distort images to protect the privacy of depicted subjects. Again, that's may. And they may limit release if privacy cannot be protected via redaction. So Florida has more exemptions to that. So again, they're considered public records. However, there's a pretty large provision that if the recordings take place in a private residence or some other arena where someone can reasonably expect privacy, then those recordings are exempt from being a public record. There's also quite a bit of leeway for courts to determine whether or not to disclose recording. And again, that's a fairly common component across states that have specific laws related to body cam records. And then there are several exemptions based on specific circumstances beyond those 2. For example, recordings involving minors, things like that. And then North Carolina is a unique case. They actually passed a law in 2016 that determined that body cam recordings are not defined as public or personnel records. So again, they're kind of the opposite of the other 2 states there. And so in that case, there are certain persons that can request those records, typically the person who's involved in the recording or their representative, depending on the circumstances. And recordings, again, may be released by court order. And so just wanted to end with a resource that we have in case you wanted to access the 50 state public records laws. We've got a webpage that has links to all of those in case you're interested in a specific state. And then, again, I appreciate you having me here today, and I'm happy to answer questions you may have.
Thank you. I'll first go to Northern Nevada members. Any questions in Northern Nevada?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question, and thank you for the overview. And it's interesting always to see what happens in other states. But how much, if you know at all, and it's not a knock if you don't, do you know about Nevada's public records law, or is it just from the general perspective? Do you have any idea about how Nevada does it?
Thank you for the question. Again, for the record, Will Clark. I have been reading up on Nevada's law in preparation for the hearing, but would not consider myself an expert.
And thank you. I was just curious. Like I said, it's not a knock, and because I don't know the other states' laws. I know ours pretty well, but not the other states. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Daly. Always good to hear from you. Members, any questions down here in Southern Nevada? Vice Chair Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that presentation. I know every time I engage in this conversation outside of the state, one of the topics is what activates or what triggers the camera, because one of the concerns that anytime, somebody from the legal community or the general community is upset about something not being captured is the question of the responsibility falling on the officer to turn it on, and whether or not that was a mistake if they forgot to turn it on. Sometimes it automatically stays on. I wanted to know if you had any data on that, or if in the conversations you've been having at the national level, if you've seen that particular topic come about. So just curious to see, just through your lens, if you have any more feedback on that, on what's triggering the actual camera to come on.
Thank you for the question. Again, for the record, Will Clark, NCSL. I personally I've not worked with that issue in particular, but I do have colleagues that work in this issue area, and I would be happy to follow up with you and then get you in touch with them as well.
Members, any other additional questions? I did want to ask regarding the ombudsman, like what that looked like in other states, and maybe, and I don't know that you can get me that information right now, but if you could get me kind of some overview of like what the ombudsman for public information looks like in other states and how that's used. I'm also interested because, I mean, it was a question that I had asked some of the law enforcement agencies. You know, they right now are in complete control of whether or not they accept or deny a public information request. So then how does this kind of change that model?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Again, for the record, Will Clark. I'm happy to continue that conversation with you after the hearing. I do have a list of states that I could share, and each one of their ombudsman's office is going to be structured differently. So there are different ombudsmen for different topic areas in some instances. So with these public records request ombudsman, it is a unique office. So it's going to vary by state, but in general, there is that shared philosophy of it being a mediation, and the idea is to resolve that issue, I think, without necessarily taking it to a legal route and just trying to comply with the law. So I'd be happy to follow up with you after the hearing.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Members, any additional questions? Assemblyman MacArthur? We got them all for you? He said we pretty much got all his questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing to work with you as we have questions and need more research.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. And at this time, we'll go to we'll go ahead and invite Dr. Robert Conrad, the Secretary of the Nevada Open Government Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate your patience as we get through these hearings. We've just had a lot of guests that had different commitments today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope to be brief. It's been a long afternoon, so thank you all for sticking around. Thank you, Madam Chair Torres and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us to present today. My name is Bob Conrad, and I'm on the Nevada Open Government Coalition. I'm also a board member of the Nevada Press Association, and I am editor and publisher of thisisreno.com, which is a news source for the greater Reno area. I'm speaking, though, today on behalf of the Nevada Open Government Coalition. The nonpartisan coalition is comprised of journalists, attorneys, academics, members of nonprofit organizations, and open government advocates. Each group and our board members regularly interface with government entities, whether they are local school districts or state of Nevada agencies. And each is also profoundly concerned with how these agencies are handling their responsibility as stewards of public resources. Today, I'm going to briefly discuss the realities of trying to get public records from government agencies. Public records are the gateway to seeing how taxpayer resources are actually being spent or managed. Public records-based news reporting has regularly uncovered government practices that agencies would prefer remain in the dark, and I have numerous examples. Public records are vital to counteracting the one-sided narrative so prominently advanced by government agencies. These agencies craft and maintain a singular positive image of their activities. I welcome you to follow almost any government agency on social media to see what I mean. Public records, however, tell the rest of the story. Excuse me. One example is Tesla selling its tax credits to the MGM. That story was published on This Is Reno in 2016. But it was the result of very difficult efforts trying to get public records from the Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development. It all started because GOED, at the time refused to answer questions about transferable tax credits. The source for those answers, however, were in the public records. But it wasn't until after arguing with the agency, hiring legal counsel, and waiting for months that GOED finally produced the records that I requested. Because of that story, which was picked up by national media, an audit was requested of Tesla's deal with the state. Transferable tax credits have since received more scrutiny by this body since that time. State law is very clear that government records are presumed to be open to the public. It is more common, however, that local government agencies put up numerous barriers to public records requesters. Some agencies even hire law firms to deny public records requests and to fight court battles. It is a severe problem, and it is contrary to the Nevada Public Records Act and associated case law, which mandates any exceptions to disclose records must be viewed extremely narrowly. And it's not just a problem for the news media. Citizens often cannot get records they may need for insurance purposes, legal reasons, or simply to verify basic information. Nonprofits, attorneys, environmental organizations, and many, many others face barriers to getting government records. Even elected officials such as yourselves are denied access to records about the very people they are meant to oversee. In my role with This Is Reno, I currently have pending litigation against the Reno Police Department and 2 cases against the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Each of these cases was filed for 2 reasons. One is that the agencies frequently refuse to answer even the most simple of questions to fact-check or verify information. The other reason is that these agencies improperly responded to public records requests with excessive redactions, months and months of delays, or simply refusing to release the records at all. One of my cases against the Reno Police Department was decided in the Nevada State Court last year, as mentioned earlier today. The court ruled on 2 significant issues. One is that law enforcement agencies, such as the Reno Police Department, cannot deny or close public records requests by claiming that all open investigations are automatically private. Despite prevailing on this issue, Reno Police and the Washoe County Sheriff's Office still deny any records until an investigation is completely closed, merely by citing the longstanding Don Ray of Nevada v. Bradshaw decision. The Reno City Attorney recently said in court, despite this ruling, that if an investigation is open, they will not release records. That is not what Don Ray says. In fact, it said law enforcement essentially must have a good reason to keep an open investigation private. My case against RPD confirmed that. The second issue in the case against RPD was whether officer faces could be redacted from body cam footage. This Is Reno, with support from this Open Government Coalition, the Nevada Press Association, and others, argued that body cam redaction should be limited. George Floyd's killing at the hands of Minneapolis police was cited as a key reason for making body cam footage accessible. Unfortunately, the Nevada Supreme Court found the Nevada Peace Officers' Bill of Rights trumped the Nevada Public Records Act. That Bill of Rights says that unless a law enforcement officer expressly permits his photograph to be released to the public, law enforcement agencies do not have to produce those images. And here's what that looks like. That means officer faces are routinely redacted from body cam footage. When body cams were rolled out to the public at great taxpayer expense, the promise was that they would encourage better officer behavior, increase transparency, and foster accountability. The reality today is far different. And in this image here, I would like to call attention to the fact that even though that court ruling said that law enforcement agencies can redact officer faces, what you're seeing here is redactions of the faces of medics who are not employed by the sheriff's office. What is happening now is that taxpayers are paying for extreme levels of redactions. Officers are also bypassing transparency by signaling to one another to turn off their cameras. They're muting audio to avoid disclosing what they are talking about, and agencies are requesting excessive fees before body cam footage is released. This is a problem across the country and one that needs to be addressed. ProPublica last year reported that body cam footage frequently contradicts police narratives, and that had Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin's history of violent behavior, which was documented on his own body cam, had that been addressed, George Floyd would still be alive. ProPublica said, "The footage was left in the control of a department where impunity reigned." ProPublica also quoted an attorney saying that Chauvin should have been fired in 2017. I will close with one last example. As you may know, the Clark County School District denied a records request for school police body cam footage. The ACLU of Nevada sued to get those records. Sure enough, after an extensive court battle, back up this slide here, what was revealed is that the school district lied about what had actually occurred during an incident with students, officers were caught lying, and taxpayers footed the bill for the district's records denial. They continue to challenge that, according to this article in yesterday's Las Vegas Sun. The executive director of the ACLU said, basically, it was clear the district lied and police officers fabricated a reason to stop and accost children. I suspect these kinds of situations happen far more often than any of us get to know about. I hope the points today are clear. Government agencies consistently go to great lengths to avoid making records public. Citizens and decision makers such as yourselves remain in the dark when Nevada's public records laws are so routinely abused around the state. It is an uphill battle because, to date, the only remedy is to file costly public records lawsuits, and those take years to resolve. What is perhaps most offensive is that taxpayers pay for this. Government attorneys have far more time and greater resources to battle records cases, even on flimsy grounds, and I believe they do this because they can. Case law frequently shows those agencies are going to lose in court, but these attorneys and agency managers let expenses pile up anyway. In short, there is no incentive for government agencies to follow the letter and the spirit of public records laws, so they do not. It is our hope that legislative action is taken to disincentivize abuses of the Nevada Public Records Act. We look forward to working with you in the future so that these issues can be fixed. I'm happy to take any questions, and I thank you for your time and for sticking around in this meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Conrad, for your presentation. And so first I'll go to Northern Nevada and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm all by myself up here now, so. And not really a question so much. I mean, a lot of what the gentleman is talking about, in some fashion, I've experienced in record requests that I've made. Had to take Washoe County School District to court and those types of things. We won. But on the other side is a comment. And I know some people have a great deal of anxiety about it on the 130 plus exemptions that are listed out. I remember the bill. And there's probably another 100 plus in regulation. I don't know if you're aware of that as well, but in regulation. But at the same time, I think some of the efforts that have been put out by some organizations to get information on, what a retiree under the public employees retirement system is getting, have gone too far. In other words, public employees didn't sign up for that stuff. You may have a different opinion on that. But I agree with you that, and I can give one example. I was in a rural county, I think it was Eureka, and I stopped in and asked for some information at the county clerk's office, and the lady's response to me was, "Who are you?" And I answered her, I says, "I'm John Q. Public." I said, "No, my name is Skip Daly." I said, and she said, "Well, what do you want it for?" And I restrained myself and told her, although my first thought was, none of your damn business. So I understand some of the things that you go through on what the public records requests and things are, and we do need to fix some things, but we have to balance it against some of the other concerns that people have out there. And the redacting in the faces, they should redact the faces. Should be able to see the badge number, though.
If I can respond just briefly, I should note that across the country, body...
Yes, and just if you could please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Bob Conrad for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can comment in response, across the country, most body cam footage is not redacted. You can go on YouTube, look up most any jurisdiction, and you'll find body cam footage of police activities where there are not redactions of officer faces. I actually field complaints from out-of-state media outlets wondering why Nevada does it this way, and unfortunately, I kind of have to tell them it's partly my fault.
Thank you. And Senator Daly, do you have any additional questions or follow-ups?
No, I'm good. I mean, we could go on for hours about it, but I'm good.
You got all day. That's why I do these meetings in the afternoon, Senator. Members, any questions here in Southern Nevada? Vice Chair Flores?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I really do appreciate it. I know that sometimes, so every single session we have this conversation, and I'm saying that as somebody who's not been here that long. I know folk, well, before I was ever even considering running, we're talking about this. And we're always having this balancing act with what is an abuse and, just folk out there who are trying to make it impossible for small jurisdictions to kind of operate local government versus, what are we actually hiding from the public and where do we navigate that? I'm just curious, with some of our smaller jurisdictions, I'm assuming you've probably been involved in, at some point, some conversation with them, either in a lawsuit and or requesting information. But I'm just curious to know, because I know one of the complaints I'll often hear is anybody who wants to have, if we want to push the line towards transparency versus that, they'll make the argument that you're on the side of you want absolute transparency and you're not reasonable. And I know that's not true, by the way. I'm not making that accusation. But could you give some insight in what you've seen in other states, particularly when it comes to that issue where you have these self-proclaimed vigilantes or whatever you want to call them, where they're out there being disruptive with local government. And then I know there's a lot of that gets put up on social media, and they're just doing it for the purposes of kind of causing some tension and then giving themselves some likes, right? And challenging different local jurisdictions. And so I've had local jurisdictions to tell me, kind of point to that and show me some evidence. I know some of our particular small jurisdictions got hit by some of these popular kind of YouTubers who do that. And they cited that as an example. But I'm just curious to know, in what you've seen, you've been involved in this, you've been in the trenches more than probably most humans in this room. Just how do you respond to that, and where do you kind of draw the line of reason?
Bob Conrad for the record. Thank you, Vice Chair Flores. I believe you're referring to the First Amendment auditors. I personally have not had any experience with them. I know there are some in the Reno-Carson area, and I believe I can't speak for them, but I believe what they're trying to do is to ultimately educate government employees about what is and is not open access to government facilities. That's not really my area of expertise, so I'm hesitant to comment more on that. But I do know in many cases around the country, those First Amendment auditors often prevail in court when ultimately what they've done is being tested. Typically, it's a government employee, well, like the senator just mentioned, the employee in, I believe, did you say Ely or Eureka? Yeah, asking questions, which frankly, with respect to the Nevada Public Records Act, are fairly invasive and inappropriate. It doesn't matter why you're requesting a record or who you are. Those records are open to the public. So I'm a little hesitant to speak on the First Amendment auditors. I don't know any. I've never witnessed any, but I believe their intent is to push the boundaries of what is acceptable to videotape, for instance, in a government facility.
And thank you. And I really did mean it more of a softball question, because I understand that that's a few humans who do that, right? The idea that the floodgates are going to open, people are just going to go out there and just test the limits of what a FOIA can do, I just don't think that's real. And that's really all I was getting at, because I know I'll get that sometimes, that there's just this like line of human beings waiting to just, in a saturated way, start demanding things for no reason, just because they can. And I just don't know that that's something that we actually see. And I just wanted to get your take on that. But I meant it more of a softball question than anything else.
Thank you, Bob Conrad, again, Vice Chair Flores. I used to be a public information officer, and I developed public records policies for state agencies here in Nevada. And I took public records seriously as a PIO, and I take them seriously as a journalist. It can and is offensive when people do extremely voluminous records requests just because. I know that does happen. And I believe there's been some cases in Washoe County. I haven't followed them super closely. But I do agree that there is a limit there. And I don't know the answer to that. And speaking on behalf of the Open Government Coalition, it might be something that we would need to explore and address, perhaps with this committee.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And I think that's every single time we have this come up, we go in that direction, because if we don't have that, unfortunately, it really would be impossible for some folk to meet some of those requirements. And I know a couple local jurisdictions, in fact, as I was sitting here, got a message reminding me of a couple of scenarios, but I appreciate that. And it is ultimately the worst of all fears, right? We throw the worst hypotheticals in both directions, and then it just makes it very difficult for us to continue to fall right in the middle of that. But I appreciate your insight, and we'll have this conversation again next session for sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair Flores. If I may, Bob Conrad for the record. It's actually in statute that when an agency gets a voluminous records request, that agency's responsibility is to help perhaps the requester narrow what it is they're looking for. And candidly, I rarely see that on my end.
Thank you, Dr. Conrad. And since Vice Chair Flores asked you a softball question, I'm going to ask you a baseball question. But my question specifically is just like, based off of the issues that you've kind of highlighted throughout your presentation today, and, just for members of the public, I'll make sure, our staff will make sure that those are posted on Nellis this afternoon. But based off of that presentation, what needs to be done, or what recommendations does Nevada for Open Government Coalition have on how we can, both make government more accessible, but then also prevent some of those like bad actors, as you mentioned, saying like, you don't need that voluminous of a request. Like, how do we narrow it down?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a member of the Open Government Coalition and Nevada Press Association, we are now discussing how to address some of these issues. We have not made any headway on any discussion. It's just being talked about now. So I'm hesitant to make any specific policy recommendations. I will tell you that based on what other members have had to deal with, particularly in the Las Vegas area, is that agencies, as I mentioned before, are disincentivized to follow the law, which is why in that slide, you saw that I believe it was Las Vegas Metro and Clark County spent more than $500,000 battling public records cases. To me, the case law and the Nevada Public Records Act are fairly clear. And what I've seen in Clark County and also in my own cases is that government attorneys will take little slivers of something in a case that they have actually lost, and they will turn that on its head and make it seem like, oh, here's an exemption, and they will fight tooth and nail for that. I got one today in my inbox where it was just strange. The Henderson Corrections Officer case, you may be familiar with that. The group tried to get the Review Journal to remove a video off of their website, and they cited my case. My case says nothing about a news media source redacting officer faces. It was the most bizarre legal argument I've ever seen, but it was actually fairly consistent with what we see across the state, which is Don Ray was a case, I believe it was City of Reno police lost. They still cite it, though, as an exemption to the Nevada Public Records Act inappropriately, and they do it regularly. That case, I believe, was decided in 1990, and they cite it for something that it doesn't actually mean. It's very strange.
Thank you. And I guess, like, from my perspective, just taking all that information in, it becomes an issue, right? Because it becomes a costly, lengthy process in order to get the information that is requested. And so if the argument is, like, let's go to court every single time, then, I mean, for many people, like, that might have actual information that they need for a viable reason, for a viable case, or for information for, the media's sake, then it becomes a challenge and an undue burden to access it. And so who would have access to that would be very limited, right? Because, maybe Nevadans for open government have the abilities and the means to retain an attorney, but many Nevadan families wouldn't have that same access if they needed that information. And so that there becomes a barrier. To your knowledge, is there any appeals process, or is all those cases then have to go through the courts, correct?
Madam Chair, Bob Conrad again for the record. Yes, the only redress for the issue here is to file a petition in district court. And that in and of itself is very burdensome. In Washoe County, I know of very few attorneys who take records cases, let alone take them on a contingency basis. So that is challenge number one, finding the right person to do it. On the board of the Nevada Open Government Coalition, we have a superb attorney, Maggie McCletchy, who does take these cases. I believe she works a lot with the Review Journal. As an independent news publisher, I don't have the resources to file petitions in district court. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that district court judges frequently seem unaware, or perhaps they just seem unaware of the Public Records Act and what it means. And I'd like to give you an example. The Washoe County Sheriff's Office, when you file a public records request with them, they automatically respond and say, we will get back to you in 30 days. The Nevada Public Records Act mandates 5 days. So automatically they're giving themselves an extension. We are currently in litigation in the state court over that because we believe that 5 days actually means 5 days, not when they get around to it within a 30-day time period. And the Nevada system of higher ed engages in that same practice as well. So to answer your question, the only tool to get this fixed is litigation, and that is out of reach for most people. And I consider myself very fortunate. I've had 2 attorneys since I've been a news publisher that I've worked with who have been exceptional and very generous, and they take my cases because they believe these issues are important, and they believe a lot of the records denials that I've faced are just simply unlawful. So I'm very fortunate. I don't have a budget to do this, but that's the only way to get out of this. So what I see, and in addition, I get complaints from citizens, ex-law enforcement, other attorneys, other news media on a weekly basis. They will forward me their records denials, and my response is always the same. This denial is completely inappropriate. What they're citing is not what they're it doesn't mean what they're claiming it does. You need to find an attorney and challenge this. And rarely does that happen. It's, in my opinion, an absolute travesty what's happening with the Nevada Public Records Act and how it's being handled.
Thank you. I don't believe there's any other question from members here or from Senator Daly in Northern Nevada. So thank you so much for spending your,
Madam Chair.
basically your afternoon. It looks like Senator Daly does have a question. Go ahead, Senator.
Not necessarily a question, just a clarification on what was stated about the 5 days. The law does say that they have to respond in 5 days, but they don't necessarily have to provide the information in 5 days. They do have to give a potential timeline on when they expect they'll be able to provide the information, so they can take more time, but it has to be reasonable and those types of things. And I know our friend here, quoted some of the things about case law and various things. And I've seen those case laws where they say, oh, well, we get this exemption because this is deliberative, and every excuse they can do that. They cite 20 different cases on why they don't have to provide something. Sometimes it holds up, sometimes it doesn't. But what our state law says is that if they deny any records requests, they have to specifically name the statute that makes it exempt. And I've always interpreted that if there's no statute making it exempt, it's not exempt, and all this case law is not applicable in the state of Nevada. And maybe we should have to clear that up. On the other side, what some of the stuff they were saying, public agencies have a lot of tools and weapons to delay in various things. And not that they're all bad. There are people that go and just make information requests, very large ones, give me everything you have on whatever it might be. They couldn't possibly answer it. Really, the only tool a public agency has is, well, here's the bill it's going to be. It's going to be $8,000 by the time I make 20,000 pages, and it couldn't possibly be. And they have time that they have to redact and do all of the things. So it's not as simple as that. There are bad actors on both sides, but there are some things that we could clean up and make better. I agree.
Thank you. Members, any additional remarks or questions? All right, Assemblyman De Silva staying quiet on this one. Assemblyman MacArthur, it looks like you have a question? No, I don't. Oh, he said he does not. There was just an issue. He accidentally raised his hand. Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for joining us. At this time, we are going to go ahead and go to the next item on our agenda, which is agenda item number 5, which is public comment. We're going to go ahead and open it up for the second round of public comment. If you're listening online and would like to provide public comment, please call 888-475-4499, then enter the meeting ID 832-7603-0295 and press pound. When prompted for a participant ID, press pound again. At this time, I'll invite anyone here in Las Vegas wishing to testify in public comment. We have a room full of local government lobbyists, but they all are looking like they're going to pass on this public comment opportunity. We'll go ahead and go to Northern Nevada and what seems to be a packed house. It seems that nobody is
nobody
cutting
here.
us to And here, on the phones, BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in public comment?
Thank you, Chair Torres. The public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. And I would like to thank the presenters. I know we had a rather lengthy afternoon meeting here today, but we are still out before 5. So I do like these afternoon meetings. Thank you so much to staff in Northern Nevada as well as here in Southern Nevada for making sure that we could run this and run it efficiently and smoothly. And, you know, Assemblyman MacArthur, did you have anything you wanted to add for your MacArthur Minute? I know you've been looking forward to this. We talked about it over the phone yesterday. He didn't have one today, but he did want to share that he did find out he's only a couple months older than my grandpa. So we are really excited because in April, when we meet, we'll also be celebrating his next birthday. It'll be just a couple days ahead of his birthday, if I remember correctly. So I look forward to celebrating with you all and seeing you all in April. Thank you. At this time, we are adjourned.